Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning and welcome back for council members and welcome to the retreat to the two members that are joining us this morning. My name is Megan Dodge. For those of you that I haven't met, this is Lauren Palmer. I'm here, you might have met her last. But we're really excited about day two. And before we get started, a couple housekeeping items. For those of you who stayed here last night, check outside 11. Has everyone kind of done what they need to do? If not, we can break. But reminder to check us at 11. The restrooms are out here and kind of behind this wall. So if you go across the staircase to the left, you'll see the restrooms. Okay. So we're excited for today, but we want to start with just first by welcoming the leadership team members to the retreat and also reflecting on yesterday. So what I want to do is to kind of bring the newcomers into the fold is ask you each to introduce yourselves, because I haven't met you all and your title, and then to maybe share like a curiosity you have about the retreat yesterday or even about today. But we want to make sure that you have a chance to express kind of that curiosity. And then following the SLT intros, we're going to ask those who were here yesterday as your icebreaker to share a reflection you have, like something that surprised you or just a key takeaway from yesterday. Any kind of reflection is welcome. So, who from SLT wants to start?
I'll start.
Okay.
My name is Chris Mullins. I'm the Executive Director of Management Services, and I want to know if anyone saw a ghost.
None of us slept, so we don't know.
Oh, that's pretty good.
When I looked in the mirror, I thought it was a ghost.
I'll go next, I guess.
Yeah, let's just go.
So Shay, Interim City Development Director. I'd be curious what the most challenging part yesterday was.
Other SLT members, let's do.
Oh, at this table?
Yeah, let's just do that.
I'm Todd Lawrence, I'm the Communications Director. And I just lost my curiosity. I'm just mostly curious about what we're gonna go through with the strategic plan.
Okay, thanks.
So Steve Kelly, Fire Chief. Yes, I'm interested to hear from council what on the plan really resonates and where we need to do some course changes. Okay.
Should we just shift over to this table then?
Yeah, hi, I'm Chris Steinke. I'm the interim Parks and Rec Director. And I guess I'm excited to hear how the council all got along because it seems like a very, very good council. So we're looking forward to what's that? No, because it seems like everybody it's really, really a strong council that's we're looking forward to working with.
Thank you.
Hey, good morning. Adam Kruger, Economic Development Director. I'm curious about two things. One, how did Everclear sound live? And two, I'm anxious to get some feedback from council on the strategic plan today, similar to what Chief Kelly said.
Thank you.
Chief Barrett, I'm the police chief, and I'm most curious about Tiffany's presentation this afternoon.
Thanks for the pressure. Okay, to this table here.
Trisha Potter, HR Director. Just excited to learn. This is my first retreat.
Okay, great. Welcome. Nice to meet you.
And Kristen Long, City Clerk. I'm interested. I think you guys did like personality test type thing yesterday. So kind of what council's personality are.
Kim Newhart, Finance Director. I think I'm curious to see what council brings up as we go through the strategic plan and all the different tasks.
All right, please take here.
Hi, I'm Erica Sun. I'm the budget director, and similar to Kim, I'm most interested in hearing feedback from council on the strategic plan.
Great. Sounds like I'm Emily Hunt. I'm the interim utilities and infrastructure director, and also curious. It's my first retreat, but I really want to know who made the most fascinating.
Still, only in charge Okay, well, welcome everybody. Now let's switch it over to those who were here yesterday. Feel free to kind of react to some of the curiosities. We're just a reflection that you have from yesterday. Who would like to start? Yes.
Really great to see the personality or the, I guess, the tendencies of the council and that kind of plays in how we interact. I really like seeing the hats, like really laying out the hats that council workers and what really stood out to me was that competing value or what can be competing between like big picture thinking and then just the customer service reaction.
Yeah.
Element. So that was really just anything to plot.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. And those themes will continue to show up as we think about like, hey, what's our role, this council role in strategic plans?
Yeah, so yeah, my take, I think, like you talked about a lot, I'm a community builder and then also the, what's that one that you like, we like the legal policer, if you will, right? But then, yeah, and then also, and like, and try to, I want to work on trying to not transition, but like get more of the big picture. I do have some of that quality in me as well, to try and bring more of that out in me to complement the community, So, thank you.
I really enjoyed that fluency test and thought it's an opportunity to learn about myself and positives and maybe unhealthy aspects in which I put myself to. So it's good self-reflection and then the fireside chat is nice. It sounds more like what's with the blinds and just kind of like reads like into the day.
Yeah, thank you.
I think I should be repeating things, but I think with the personality, the quiz that we had yesterday, I feel like for myself, there's definitely some tendencies in one direction, but I just think about how through your life cycle you can put different ones on. Yep, and and which ones you probably need to accentuate more.
Situations. Yeah, I think a couple people kind of shared that reflection yesterday. As you look to your tendencies for the hats, I think your stage in life and the role you're playing might change. Okay, should we head over to this table here?
My reflection is that maybe I need to start working on some more internal goals.
You were there yesterday.
Yes, you were.
That's different for a council member. I don't have too many stories presiding judge. So I have to say, when Tansy spoke of her last answer, as I lose my shoe, don't look at my toes. I really liked that because it was a nice culmination of what we had gone through throughout the day, of the personalities, which intriguingly love how they, for the most part, lined up with people's self-reflection. But then the last answer, the fireside chat, like the characterization, it's so important that with all of these pieces moving one city forward and upward progression, the expectations of how these pieces can just mesh in a healthy, positive, communicative, transparent way with all these expectations vetted in with all the push and pulls. It was a really nice way to capture all of that.
Thank you.
And I very much enjoyed the activity where we discovered what we thought is each council member, what it means to them to do good work. And it's different across all people. And so learning how that, what that means to different people was insightful.
Yep.
Starting to feel like we missed out.
There were some good reflections yesterday, self and then reflections on, oh, that what that means to them, it's different. Zooming out a little bit on that, so thank you, yeah. Okay. Over this table?
You let Rob
Oh,
off.
great.
Awesome.
I see you.
I guess one of my reflections was the opportunity for fellowship amongst the council, and I think there'll be more of that today, and not just the dinner, but throughout. I mean, that's kind of why I think you do these. One of the reasons why you do these events. I know from a answering your constituents, this can sometimes be a difficult thing to justify, but I do think it's really important to get delineated. You know, I was attorney wants to talk about connection before content, and that it's really important to, you know, even if you don't have the best relationship with somebody, that you maintain that human connection so that you can do the work. So I think that was my reflection on yesterday.
Thanks, Russ. Yeah, so, I think one of the things we talked about was we are people outside of council. And we had a lot of our examples that we gave around how we behave happen in our daily lives as well. And I think we had agreement, at least partly, to have dinner together for council meetings in the conference room, if possible. But even if it's 15 minutes, to be able to decompress and talk to each other as people before we get to the business of doing the work for the city. Thank you, Matt.
Kind of two reflections, one kind of on the social end of things. I mean, I just think it's always interesting what you learn about people, like, the connections. Councilmember Salazar and I were chatting about Des Moines, and, she's telling me, was sharing things about the way she experienced Des Moines that were different than us, and kind of just similarities in our family. And I know that the judge and Councilmember Byrd made connections. I mean, it is interesting as people, we have common threads that, you don't discover unless you work to discover them. And so I think that was fun. I also really appreciated the hat exercise and how introspective council members were about that. And I think I have two thoughts in terms of the staff, and we'll share some of that back with the SLT. Clear that we have some really strong natural strengths in some of those hats. And so I think helping us make sure that we're providing information that supports council members in those sort of natural perspectives to make sure that those values are showing up in the way that we're talking about things. But then also recognizing some of those hats, we didn't have as much of a natural inclination on the council. And so, and making sure all of those values are showing up in our decisions. How do we cultivate sort of in the council and in the work that the staff does, making sure that we are making, decisions that are balancing all of those perspectives and considerations. So, and my guess, if we were to broaden that across everybody in this room, we probably do have all of those hats sort of covered as a big broad team.
Thanks, Tansy. Yeah, we pulled up the hats here, so you can reflect on those.
Yes, that was all word hats.
I was like, yeah. We can't guess. Yeah. I love it. All right, so Councilman.
So, who asked about the personality trait? It's exactly what you think it was. Whatever you thought they were, that's exactly.
No surprises.
Yeah, none. I think the ability to actually socialize and kind of get to know everybody was a very big key takeaway from everything. There's a lot of members that I haven't really sat down with and had conversations with other than being in city council meetings. So getting to know that person on a one-to-one level was a really great situation, like a situation for us to be in and kind of get to know. And then seeing where everybody has different dots that we're connecting on, like where we can all have those connections was a lot of fun. We found out that the judge used to be my wife's advisor at one time, so that was pretty fun.
In a sorority house. Just imagine how the conversation went for us to figure out, wait a minute, your wife's a Kappa Kappa Gamma? I was an advisor for sorority. Wait, what year was this?
She asked me what year, so she sent me a picture of girls who were in there, and I sent it to my wife. She goes, "Why don't these pictures of these girls in the sorority?" I go, "Hey, look, just answer the question. You know who they are or not?"
Thank you, Councilman. Okay.
Skip that in the help.
Well, since Tammy and I had the most time to reflect, I have the most intelligent. I'm not.
No pressure.
Actually, I was gonna point out when we were doing this, how we govern exercise, with the different nats, at least in the small group that I was a part of, it was exciting to see, and so kind of talking about what Eric was hoping to get out of this meeting, and Steve and others mentioned it. As far as some of the strategies the council members were starting to bring up, will lead perfectly into the discussion this morning on strategic focus areas, because I mean, that's a lot of
65 actions that are starting to address some of this stuff, so it made me excited to actually hurry up and get to this morning's exercise, that we can start incorporating some of those conversations into exactly what we're working on as part of those strategic focus areas. And I don't think Councilmember Byrd ever said what he was from this.
Well, you just have to put me on a spot like that. I was the only rebel.
So there are 4 types of tendencies, the one rebel and the rest. Okay, we got one more here. Yeah,
I said it fits exactly what you guys thought.
no one wanted to say anything though.
I think it was interesting, the importance of cards to council, our requests for information for residents. I think that discussion was interesting in terms of how important those are to council, how they learn more from them and learn more about what staff does from the answers in those versus the big picture stuff we usually work on with council. So it's interesting to know that's important.
Yeah, and those cards, just like strategic plan and what the exercise we're gonna do today, it's an opportunity for council to kind of be that essential connector between the community and the important work staff's doing. So yeah, thank you. I heard a lot of common themes here. I heard people really appreciating just getting to know and the social aspect, getting to know their council members and the self-reflection that we got to do yesterday. And then from the leadership team members coming, curiosity around that. So that was cool to hear. And then a lot of focus on the strategic plan and looking forward to the exercise this afternoon. So, or this morning rather. Any other kind of takeaways before we move forward? Lauren, do you have? Good, okay. All right, so we're kind of moving forward and we're a little ahead of our agenda, which is nice. We can make up for it later. We're gonna move into our strategic plan exercise, okay? So this is really a chance for staff to share what's next on the strategic plan. We had some really good reflections from Tansy yesterday in the fireside chat where we were thinking about, hey, council has done a lot of work around building this important policy document, same as kind of the way they do in the budget. And now it's time for staff to kind of take the reins and do the implementation and implement those plans. But we want to make sure council members have a thoughtful process today where they can use their council member lens, the really unique lens that others don't have, to ask critical questions, to give insight that only they can offer. So that's what today's about. But before we get started, I'm going to hand it over to Rob, who's going to do a brief presentation to kind of ground us, and then we'll come back for instructions on the exercise.
Thank you. Good morning again, everyone. So the purpose of, here we go. Found that up. The purpose of my brief talking points is just to kind of reset the stage on where we are with the strategic plan and make sure that we're kind of all at a level set as we go into this discussion for the balance of the morning. I'll get into it a little bit later in the slide deck, but this session for us is really a critical point where we are, as has been said multiple times, really looking for your feedback and your engagement on the plan as we are kind of embarking upon this critical stage of developing and starting the implementation of each of the actions. So won't go over the agenda. I'm going to provide a little bit of an overview, talk about a little bit of the strategic focus areas. I'm not going to go through the plan, chapter and verse. You have, if you haven't had a chance to see in your packet, you've got a beautiful strategic plan. Thanks for Todd's staff for putting that together. And we'll get into each of the goals and actions through your exercise. I'm not going to spend as much time on that. But I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because I think this, where we think we're going from an implementation standpoint, really feeds into the type of feedback we're looking for from you all today. So just real quickly, this is, and apologies for the council, some of you council members have seen this before. Again, I'll go through it pretty quickly. These are, if you think back, here we were, this was last year's strategic planning was a year ago. We basically, with the help of EverStride, developed, council had a discussion, developed the 4 strategic focus areas: vibrant, purposeful development, connected community, safe, supporting local community, and organizational excellence. So if you think back a year, that's where we were. We didn't even have those 4 set up when we were up in Fort Collins. If there were subsequent conversations. And again, I won't go through every one of these steps to adoption in October. But what I will say, what this should show is the level of investment in this process from y'all and from the staff as well. There's been a lot of investment and a lot of energy, positive energy and momentum in this process. Again, for the new council members, you may have picked up on this already, 4 strategic focus areas. Within each of those strategic focus areas, there's a number of goals. Those will be talked about through the exercise, and each of the goals has, somewhere between 3 to 5 actions that are really kind of the level of specificity in the plans. There are 65 actions in the plan, as we said today. So again, I'm not going to dwell on the strategic focus areas, but I do want to just kind of set the stage because some of this conversation came up yesterday in the how we govern section. So vibrant purposeful development is really focused on how we grow things like housing, things like development, things like public spaces. So if those types of things were of interest to you, I encourage you to engage in all the discussions, but this is going to be the one that you're going to really want to focus on. I do just want to take a step back, particularly for the new council members and the process that we went through. We created cross-departmental throughout the organization teams to develop these plans, and so I'm not going to name all the names, but there was a lot of effort that went into this, and I was just going to say that, but I think again for you all to see the people and the personalities that were involved in crafting these plans is a little bit more impactful, and then. As we've talked before, we do have outcome measures for each one of these strategic focus areas. And as we further develop the plan and our performance management system, we'd like to further refine these as well as look at opportunity to find measures for the goals and even potentially some of the actions. So the next strategic focus areas, is connected communities. This focuses on connectivity in all forms, and as well as an emphasis on things like trails, connectivity, and transit. And here was the cross-departmental team that worked on that plan and some of the outcome measures that we're starting with. The third strategic focus area, safe, supported, livable communities. This captures kind of the public safety focus of our services. But beyond that, beyond police and fire, looks at some of the other responsive services, the more human services or parks and rec type services. And then some of our services that maybe aren't front of mind for folks. Stuff that's underground that you'll only really notice about when it doesn't work. Things like our water and sewer system, roads, that kind of thing. There was the team by Chief Kelly and the outcome measures. I should have highlighted. You saw 2 weeks ago the outcome measures that were part of the community survey. We will pluck those out of the survey. Include them in the next iteration of the plan, and then our intent, assuming council supportive, is to continue to use those as benchmarks for the strategic plan and future survey efforts. And then the final strategic focus area, organizational excellence, it's really focused internally on. I shouldn't say focus. There's an internal component of it, really about how we do the work. There's aspects of technology in the strategic focus area as well as financial security and other things. So. And there was the team that worked on that and the outcome measures. Again, we're going to get into each one of these in more depth later. So this is the slide that I'd like to actually spend the most time on because as I said, it feeds into the exercise we're about to do. So our approach to implementation, you all adopted a plan in October, and so it's great. We have a strategic plan now. Well, we need to work the plan, otherwise it's pretty documented, not all that useful. Our approach, when I was thinking about our approach, I came up with the words intentional, integrated, distributed, and coordinated. And I can see on your faces, you're like, Rob, that's a bunch of buzzwords. What do those even mean? What do you mean by intentional? We are being intentional in that we have set up 65 action teams focused on implementing this work. This is not just, we adopted the plan, we should work on this stuff. We have intentionally set up teams, and we'll talk about this a little bit, 3 to 7 members that are focused on this is something that they are deliberating on. Integrated. What we're trying to do is integrate this effort into the work that staff is doing. Staff has day jobs. We recognize that, and we're trying to develop this process in a way that it doesn't feel like it is work, but it doesn't feel like yet another thing that I have to do. It starts to feel integral and integrated to the work that I do every day as a City of Thornton employee. Distributed, meaning it isn't Tansy leading the team. Certainly the city manager takes a leadership role in the plan, the council does, but it's not being led out of the city manager's office. It's being led throughout the organization. There's leadership at all levels throughout the organization, trying to achieve the results that the plan calls for. And then coordinated is kind of the counterpart of that. We are also trying to make sure that we are coordinated, and that we are giving the team leads the tools that they need to be successful. So that's kind of this next point. We have been and imagine continuing to identify ways to provide support and build the capacity of our organization, the folks that are leading these teams. The team leads are generally not the people in this room. And in some cases, they're not even the people that report to the people in this room. So there's leadership at all levels with varying degrees of, ability to lead cross-departmental teams or, have informal influence. So we are trying to build capacity within our organization for people to lead in that way, to facilitate meetings, to, manage a project. And so again, for this integrated and distributed model to work, we think we need to continue to invest in employees to show up in that way, and continue to provide them training as we go through the process. So we did, I was telling somebody at dinner, Councilmember Martinez at dinner, we did 4 half-day in-service work sessions with an outside consultant with leads to give them project management facilitator training, which I think was really helpful, really well received by the employees, and helped pull out for us some of the anxieties that they have maybe as leaders. How am I supposed to deliver on this? Is council going to like what I put forward? How are we going to resource this thing? So that helps us from a coordinated standpoint, say, hey, what are the things that we can do from a process standpoint to support them? What are some framing or some context conversations we can have with folks to help them understand the resource challenges and how to overcome those. And so, for me personally, as a longtime employee of the city, like this is a really neat way to do this. We haven't done this since I've been here. So it's a little bit of an experiment. I think it's a good innovation, a good thing to try. And again, as an employee, this beyond the plan, like this shows an investment in leaders in our organization that I think beyond the plan will have great benefit to the way that we show up and do the work every day. So enough about that. I'm sorry, I'm very passionate. So we have set up, as I said, 65 action teams. You'll hear us. I just need to get the acronyms out of the way. These are strategic plan operational teams. So we talk about them as spots. We have 65 spots. The originally implementation team, SPITs, but nobody liked being called SPITs, so we call them spots. And Todd didn't like that. I like SPITs. Todd didn't like SPITs. Randy guys, yeah, something else. Yeah, SPITs and spats. Come on. So as I won't dwell on this thing part of this. Organized around each strategic plan action, somewhere between 3. I don't think there's any with as few as 3. I think it's more like 5 to 7 team members, and their task is to develop action plans, develop schedules, develop deliverables, and then work the plan. I'm going to come back to that point here in a second. So beyond that, as I said, we have SPATs. Tom is okay with the acronym SPATs. The people in this room are mostly, there's a couple extra that aren't here, but the people in this room comprise the SPAT. So they are designed to be advisory to the spot. So if, let's say I'm a spot lead, I am actually a spot lead, and I'm running into some trouble, like I don't know how to, navigate out of this challenge. I can't figure out how to set up this plan to get through this. I can go to my SPAT to say, hey, can I get some advice on this? Or like, I need help from somebody, Erica's being obstinate. I can go to my SPAT and they can be helpful in, talking to Erica and help, moving the roadblock that is there. Erica's actually on my team. So we think this is really important. Again, getting back to that coordinated, the integrated and distributed to me doesn't work without some level of coordination and kind of bringing folks together around a common mission. So we think this part of the implementation plan or structure is really, really important. And there I said what they're there to do. So anyways, why we're here and why this is important. The spots are right here. Actually, I think as of today, our draft action plans are due to the SPAT. So if I'm a spot lead, I've been working on this action plan. I've got an initial draft. I'm sending that to the SPAT for reviewing. The purpose of our discussion with you all today is to, as Tansy said yesterday, to get your feedback on, hey, what are the things that I as a spot lead should be considering? Like mine's about the survey. So what are the things, if there's something important to you about the survey, that we need to consider when we're developing our action plan on how to improve the survey, now would be the time to hear it. Because then as a spot lead, I say, okay, that's good to know, council, this is important, council, and I can find a way to try to integrate that into my plan, or I can't, and we need to have a conversation about that. So that's why we think this feedback at this point is really important to try to set up those teams for success when we come back to you all and talk about our great success in the plan. So again, just this I think is my last slide. So we're right here. You adopted the plan in October. We've been doing this fast spot stuff for the past couple months. We're right here at this key checkpoint. Coming out of this, we're going to be finalizing those plans and starting to work the plan. You can kind of see there's progress updates. Our next check-in that we planned with council is in tentatively in July. And so the idea is kind of an update on here's some of the key successes that we've had in the plan. And particularly maybe some of the alignment thing that's going to happen pre-2027 budget. And then again, this is a year long. We're trying to make this a year-long integrated process. And then eventually you come back a year from today and celebrate our successes and potentially talk about, okay, what's next? We've checked some things off the box. We tried some things, they didn't work. The community is dynamic. There's some new priorities that we maybe need to think about. And it's kind of a review, rinse, and repeat process to try to, again, integrate this as much as we can into our, day-to-day operations. So, that's the end of my remarks. You guys want to take it from there?
Okay, any questions for Rob? This exercise is really about better understanding what implementation looks like too. So you'll have a chance to ask staff team leads and staff at each station some more information. So we're gonna move into the next hour of this exercise, which is a World Cafe, designed after a World Cafe. Has anyone ever done a World Cafe? It's where you move across different stations and add new ideas as you move around. So that's what we're gonna do. Basically, we have 4 stations reflecting the strategic focus areas listed up here. Okay, we'll have the SMAT team lead for that strategic focus area at that station, along with 1 or 2 other leadership team members who are part of that effort. And at each one, you're gonna hear an initial update about implementation, kind of building on what Rob was describing. What's the implementation plan look like? What are some of the key first steps we're taking? Okay, you're gonna move along before, and we'll help you rotate, so don't worry about where do I go next. We'll come around. We'll have 15 minutes at each station. And as we go through, think back to kind of what Tansy was saying in the fireside chat yesterday. This is your chance as council members to bring your unique fingerprints, your unique lens that we don't have, right, as staff members, on the plan. So think about the analogy on the meal, right? Staff might be making spaghetti and meatballs. You don't want to get to the next strategic plan update at council in a few months and be like, wait, I wanted this with stir fry. So what questions do you want to not have to ask in a year or in a few months at that strategic plan update? This is your chance to ask those critical questions. Might also be a chance to help the SPAT team leads and the staff members kind of start to prioritize. There's a lot there, right? There are lots of goals, lots of projects to support those goals. What do we need to focus on first to be most successful? As we've been building this exercise, the theme has been kind of like sink or swim. We want to swim, so what do we need to know from you all to help us swim, to help us be successful in implementation? So this is your chance to weigh in, to challenge the team, ask those tough questions, and help with the prioritization. Where do we want to pump the gas, and where do we want to kind of take a break and maybe not focus on implementation on those. So any questions right now? We will a couple little pieces of support. So we'll have a worksheet that you can bring with you as you rotate. It's just for you to take notes. Okay. You don't have to turn it in or anything, you don't have to fill it out. But at each station, we're gonna have one of the staff members also fill out a worksheet, take notes, and turn that into me and Lauren so you can use it in our report. So we'll get one worksheet from each station for each strategic focus area. And then we'll have a break after each of the rotations, during that time, the SPAT team leads are gonna kind of synthesize and digest what they heard. Then we'll come back for a report out, so we get to hear from each SPAT team leader on, hey, what was the discussion, what are the key takeaways, what are we bringing with us into the implementation phase, what did we learn in council? Okay,
Maybe a question.
yeah.
This is maybe for Rob. I really like that timeline you gave, the question of like how often will we get updated and how often is it being talked about publicly, so it's kind of front center and it's kind of driving.
Yeah.
The city, but what, maybe this is part of this discussion, what does, is there something that we're trying to find that equal, like, what is success in February 2027? Is it like, hey, we worked off 5 action items, or is it like this thing and if we achieve this, we report on this in February 2027, and it's like, we're hitting the right thing, we did it, and now we're going to the next stage. Is there anything like that, or are we trying to discover that stuff?
I think we're trying to discover that as we go, if I understand your question. I mean, it's a 5-year plan. To be honest, like we're creating these action plans right now, and I'm gonna be really curious of how aggressive we can be or not. But that again, that feedback loop we had in July, I think is gonna be a good opportunity for us to highlight some of the key things, particularly if they're priority that they're moving forward, for example, in the budget, or being prioritized, and an opportunity for council to say, yeah, that feels about right, or hey, what about this? And we say, well, that's kind of on the slow burn. It's, well, wait a minute, like this is really important to us. So from my estimation, the best way I can answer that July check-in is going to be a good kind of barometer of where we're at. And then from like what success looks like, we are going to have plans of like what we think we can accomplish, and our intent is to report that out on a regular basis to council as well as to the public. We just aren't quite there yet. Todd's been working on a communication strategy around the plan. The other thing I failed to mention during my the scheduled talking points is, you will be seeing this stuff. Some of this stuff is already in the works too, and so you'll be seeing this stuff come forward. Planning sessions throughout the year. And one of the things that if you haven't noticed on the council communication, we've added a particular field that indicates which strategic focus area is applicable. So some of those are more general, but others are very specific. So and we'll try to do try to be intentional about highlighting things when they come forward. Hey, this is on your strategic plan. Every Tuesday that would come forward. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, maybe that's just like what I'm looking at discussion as what is success in February 2027.
Yeah.
Like what's measurable, practical, and how do we find that?
I don't think we're there yet, but we're trying to get there very soon. And like I said, to get your perspective on what success looks like is a critical component of that, so that we can integrate that into the plan.
Yeah, and yesterday we heard some really awesome ideas for projects that there's a lot of passion around. So be thinking about that, like what projects did we talk about yesterday or in the one-on-one interviews that would fit into these, community partners too. That's another key thing for council members to bring. You represent your wards and the community as a whole, and that should be a part of this. So those are 2 kind of key areas. All right, let's think about how this is gonna work. We're gonna have 4 groups. 3 of them are gonna be in here. Then the 4th group, everyone will get to go back to this. There's a lobby back there, and we'll help you find it. It's across the main hallway, and it's to the left, past the quotes. Okay, so let me tell you who's who. We're gonna have some safe, supportive, livable community back here in this corner, led by Steve Kelly. Together, people will be Jim and Emily. Okay. And then up here, right, this table here. Erica's gonna help with organizational excellence together with Krisha. And back here. Back here, corner will connect to communities. Yeah. Led by Pat, and then Jason will help with that. The last but not least, we'll have vibrant and purposeful development with Adam leading, and then Chris and Kim helping with that. Back up the road, so in 15 minutes each, we'll help you rotate. Let's start this way, we've got the people who were here yesterday are gonna be divided into groups together. And you'll stay with the same group of 3 as you rotate between the tables. So starting with back here in the corner, with Steve, let's do John Algie, Mayor Coleman, and Judge Forrest. So you'll start there, the 3 of you will stick together and rotate. Up here with Erica, Organizational Excellence, let's do council members Morris, Ayala, and Tammy. Back here, we'll do council members Salazar, Russell, and Tansy. Okay, so Tansy, stay there. And then finally, we've got going back there, we'll show you where it is. We've got Councilman Bird, Martinez, and then Roth. You can show them where to go. We'll bring our sheets around. And we'll rotate any questions.
Wow, that's
Make sure you make that your profile. You headshot.
I'm impressed how the triangles are so similar in their scale.
That was my mistake. Yeah, I'm gonna stand there. Don't want to and then the drawers are gonna constantly into the wrong spot of the day. I should be right over here. It's just represents the jump down to the light.
So it was bad. It was so oh my gosh, it was great. There was no clean face. Yeah. Right now. The family man, I was not the. Yeah, I felt like that's how it's so sad. Oh, yeah, so it's on like I was like, have that I don't know. You got your window.
Which don't mean especially like
Yeah. All night. This morning, good. Don't I put it on me and I wanted to, you know, he said, like there were no stuff. I was walking around and so. Like, yeah. I did hear the concerts and then I go and like talk about it. Actually, I think consideration the difference on spots so hard. You snap.
All right, okay, Stan, we do this.
Yeah.
So there's was part of request. Such a service, collaboration, recognition. We as an object in this whole thing, so this has to offer internal and external customer service, and it's just actually for that. Now, we are providing less we have was it's a resident, it's a business, and it's an investor in our city. So that's what that we can. So we developed it. We want to bring capital. Sorry. So customer service, and actually that's spot as well. And so one of the considerations that we've generated as a smart is to just create also like customers to show up and we reflect all of our interactions with those. So it's not like this fine, right? This last one here, assess for the zero opportunities. Both at Councilmember, I also making sure to go our background. And so last time right now this just get so
This last volunteer.
I really think that.
So what we went through is that's topic. I know that so. No, it's not hospitals or something. I see some in the. I gotta say that's so you know say more of this operational so that's probably how you do it for and all got 3 cards you know I think that's something that's your experience that's going to evaluate those using I think that's the for that evaluation. So there's not to
so they actually
yes, historical mobility, all the already modern programs that we have specific moments that I mentioned so this seems off to you as well.
Yeah, again, we don't, but these are where we knew about the right channels that was going to right now.
Yeah,
It's time to just like, yes, we
turning this not just like the and the house was starting developing that landing by the
so the biggest thing that I hear about
the next school here is full survey. So but last one last right now we're exploring like systems and software. So it's
I think some the things that I have to cross highways, I do with them, so. It doesn't feel comfortable to me, sure, so, yes.
So there are.
I can stuff, you know. So I don't know what I can say is, what the budget and the problem is. Arguments.
I don't know. So that's.
So, yeah. Yeah, now I think it is. Oh, where we have the map.
Yes, that's.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Carol White's.
Right.
That's just all, yeah, that's just.
Yeah, that's one of the.
Yeah, but let me say, just for words and that's maybe for recording the songs. So we were talking, we was another one of the we were talking. Service center.
Yeah.
Here's like full reason. I would think all.
And I'm not saying that there's
School that's right here.
I'm not saying for high school is on.
Care below, yeah,
We're not really.
my outside, portrait farm, right?
For this one.
Can't buy bikes.
Yeah.
Down and forth off to 5 ways to get to the same, so that's no.
And then second one down, it's the city.
Used to bike. But I don't fight. Either riding on Highway 7 or on 68 and I go
Right now, it's going through the hospital.
So it's huge thing.
That's very disturbing.
That I have been having this also restraints so we get it. Trail start to and get the.
That's still,
Somebody, whether it's rat.
we can't target most important assessing activities like can't find any way to sleep. So I mean, so that's the end, they would also say do not on trails.
Yeah, we don't.
That way or so.
And I know that leasing on also the private development.
And I don't think
also
that
that's.
Yeah.
City step up and start that.
We know. That friends are, as you know, I put out right now, it's no so much for them.
Here's just like Highway 7.
I'll say here, I don't wanna say they're a touchdown, I'm gonna say it, but it's living the trails, but yes.
I think it's a really interesting question about maybe we're trying to leverage private development versus what they're doing to themselves, well, not as a correct number.
Private student, I sell a deli for fun. There's a lot of maintenance to it. That's stuff that's just getting more elements that are running for decades, not like to happen. So where we got there are ours, just that we will get whatever salvation comes from inside. Yeah.
You really talk to it, because I will look at garage and it's terrible. It's like that's private.
I'm sure you said all of the creation comes out together, but you should use.
So like.
You don't have to see more of it, it's not.
It's pretty much the idea, there's.
Exactly.
Because
Well, I have so much.
Oh, I can see it. That's.
So like I love such a space, like my show is dropping by here. So just.
So that was.
Yeah. That was what we were. Yeah.
And like, how is that? Yeah. Then if you're on top, there will be. Yeah, you can't even walk down. Like, so for example, when we choose the ball, it's like, and then it sounds like, there's no signal. I mean, I would walk it down. That's that was about. Like, put out it's not shaped around. But it's something says, this one. I don't know. It's going. Oh, not only wants to. You know, exploring what's down there, people are the others know, it's also, if you get up on the platform, because it's up on the hill with all. Yeah, I think that, it's not that understanding process, you know, it's not, the way it's set up, I guess, that comes from the percent there, and they want to do like, what's the right section or something, you know, they don't. It's so big, you know, hey, there's ramp up, something like that. I don't care.
I guess what I'm medium.
So I think
that's what was about this, but so they were gonna look at it. But evaluation, not that's better than me, still specific. So I was thinking, I guess, so we do, and I do want to do like once daily, I start with him, I saw him with him, so that's how I never get but told him I lost. And that's the way you're on the lost. I started to stress.
So they still go down. So then it's like,
yeah, and we're down, it's about like, they are, and you need to put.
Get rid of those slips. They're getting also, there's like those songs that are transited to going around to you. I mean, the.
Some things.
Yes. That's just service.
Well, we do that.
I don't.
And say, I just.
And I understand.
There's just five so, and they're both great organizations. Yeah, so. Yeah, it's not always private partnership.
Connections, the key destinations. You know, so we are to be. Infrastructure. That's key destination, this is really, because once they. The value of the bus, go the other way, then our. Those, so here's just not for himself, I'm sure he's wasted, you know, so it's almost like it's a good, this one, yeah. I mean, almost focuses on physical technology. To your point, there's a service coordination where he's there and just the role of our team, both of us, and only have those connections there. Even the fact that she was user experience, is sort of super, what is the up and then it is like, I was watching, it's back what you were describing, an actual trail where they just creating service to get from the end line there, to safety. Is it an actual trail? That's what I was saying. I was watching it there and I was good. And I was like, it's not, I mean. They want to know what's going on. And I'm like, yeah, high school. Right.
You know, so you don't feel like. I mean, I'm just gonna have to stay stations where it's just a student, you know,
oh, yeah, up there. But also, so now we just, yeah.
Yes, I was talking, how about, you know, like, Asian, motivation, or driving, and we're policing, well, I'm very concerned that even when you go for the right, it's up,
Again, they're only some things that's here, it has to help yourself along that. I don't have for any here. I've heard RTD say like, that's my horse station, but you have on high list, that's one of the paying for that, so why is people, it's like, okay, so we'll do it, and then I will propose that we have a new bus route that's coming in, you know, out there, you guys some generators. But that's.
Again, what's the coordination, the role, clarity, the advocacy with. Yeah. So right now, I feel like, I don't know that we have the same places built to ours. Generally, we allow this advertising for, even advertising right away. And in exchange for them, to have the ability to advertise it right away. So just to then, there's shelters, I think. We don't really hire them, they know that the relationship between them and yeah. In terms of saying, yeah, so if we get complaints, we'll follow up on it. We don't have to, and then just like, no, that's not really, I think everybody should have to have participation. Right. This year, they I don't know, we've got people like actively advertising their options. They do all the trash movement with those, and it doesn't really have a wall on those. I just, fresh, going forward, we need more criteria, do we need to decide which level of service is. Whether we trash yet. This fall house is. Just right. So if I just. It's all over us. Yeah, this is. He says, that is right. We said, so we're not really. It's kind of, the stuff that we come to that, but it's a pretty.
So it's a conversation, it's not just me, it's on you guys, they all have, it's a couple, I think we're probably is in show that that's about it, so it's not like it's still about that, I said, oh.
And these developers, they have a new route, and there's been routes.
Actually,
Actually,
so that way, that's also the rest of the station, because that's about the soft.
Yes.
Yeah, probably it's not that word. I don't know if it does that very attention, not something about baskets or anything. It's the side. Yeah, it's that's why. Well, great, that's like, and it's the point. The community.
Why you're into here.
It's coming when that happens here. Those are the calls that
That's why. Right, so, protect outdoors, that's important, is
I do think we're on a week talks about it, you know.
And so if you walk through this is, yes, that's how stuff is getting for people. And so, hey, we want to do it right. And problems. But if there's any consideration, please stop me, let me out, and we sort of guide and problem and everything. So organizational excellence, focus area is essentials. that goes through last summer and created at least 5 summer. And within those goals, it was different.
Hang out with the press.
What I did was just walk through each of them.
Fun stuff today. The rest of the guys are coming. They were questions. They got a whole sheet of stuff.
Unfortunately, ours is shorter than this.
Stand up meeting.
But I was like.
Lazy boys in the other room. The other room.
Well, overall, build that up, it's.
Yeah, I just ordered
That's not exploding.
Yeah, that was him on purpose. Quite a good time. Trying to get my city sense to guess like. So we're doing connected movies, these quick and briefly talk about this. So we do see that safe multi-market transportation options, including transit, cycling, supporting different lifestyles.
Well, we see as like a.
There's something about these conversations. This task one, we spoke a lot about, including we're not solving it's this is our solution, another pages is very hard properly. Still need to be in stress before we might be able to do there. So be a bit of beauty like this. So talking through these other lists of these like all about salvation, like St. Waters, you have to do it. Every time he is just maybe useful, and so so even like touched on was already a class so there's starts to say that's a and so somebody really so that we had kind of we had exact south like what was the use of that city and that's a single inflation stuff I feel this okay so all the fire reset yeah
Is the next grade.
So that the potential for losing our slot lane top 5 lives what's happening
Expensive thing to take action about size. Anything that showed infrastructure transit, all notice. And so I think those people are that's right.
We're gonna get started with report outs. So each of the teams is going to share and they learn from their rotations. And kind of simplify things. For the council members, this is a reflective listing. All of these groups are gonna report back to you what they learned, and then we're gonna have some dialogue where we want council members to respond and let them know if they got it right, if they missed anything, if it was fair to us anything. So we're gonna have to slow the conversation down. Sure. There's so much. I want this.
All right. So, we focused on organizational excellence. And we got 3 different pages here, so if you don't see yours on the first page, write down the next 2. So major takeaways. So first off, I just want to say, I think there was general agreement from council that we are headed in the right direction, generally speaking, as it relates to the goals, the actions, and then those first steps that we highlighted for some of the action teams. One area of focus from the council was on communication. And so there are many different elements that we picked up on as the 4 groups met with us. So you all want effective communication, and that means a variety of things. That means that we're communicating out the right information, that we're doing it in the right forum, which means like, are we hitting all of the major social media accounts? Are we, is this done best through City Voice? Are there other forums that we haven't yet explored that we need to? And then lastly, is what we're communicating easy to understand? So basically, are we doing it in such a way that residents or employees want to engage with that subject matter? We also want to, or you all mentioned having a culture of communication. So it was about like thinking about not just what do we already communicate and maybe how to communicate it better, but it was about thinking about communication and highlighting things in areas that maybe we haven't previously. So Councilmember Russell had referenced, right now we have financial information presented quarterly to council and is in the packet every month. Well, why aren't we communicating that out to the public? Should that be highlighted on our social media accounts? So, and it's really just, again, it's thinking about it in all of our areas of service. What could we be communicating and how? Utilizing all resources. So again, this is a little bit about that forum. Like, are we hitting all of the major forums? But it's also about making sure that communication goes both ways. So it's how are we communicating out, but then how are we also taking information in and synthesizing it and maybe communicating out? So Mayor Pro Tem Ayala had mentioned that, we are constantly getting information about regional efforts, or not even necessarily regional, but like community groups that are providing good services to the community. So how can we take that information in and then potentially communicate it out to the public? And then lastly, be creative. So it's not about just doing what we're already doing. It's about thinking about new ways to engage the public through polling. So, could we do a poll on Facebook that says, how much sales tax do you think we've generated this month? And then it ties into our monthly financial report. The next area was, the big takeaway was a culture of service. And this didn't speak to a single action item. We saw it as sort of a general theme overlaying a number of action items. And so first off is, maybe obvious, is that customer service focus. So making sure that we're providing good service to our community and to each other. And I actually want to sort of skip down to include and train council. So this was a topic that Councilmember Martinez brought up, where, if we're going to talk about creating a citywide philosophy on customer service, how do we bring council along with us and potentially also do some training for council on what is the philosophy and how do we show ourselves or meet others. So, this next one is career path and recruitment. And so we thought of this as
it really is culture of service in that in this one specific area, which relates to like working for local government is public service. And so how do we bring folks into, into this career path, but also just educate folks on, other ways that you might be able to serve the community. So that might look like volunteerism, it might be running for office. So like, how else can we communicate lifetime service? One item that was mentioned several times was excitement that the city is teaming up with Rocky Mountain Partnership as it relates to their high impact project. Another area that got brought up was that we currently work with 27J on internships for their high schoolers. It sounds like you all like that, and maybe could we see more of that? It was mentioned that we do partner with UCD, but there is potential and to explore other local colleges or other groups to see if there's anyone out there who would like to partner with us. And then breaking down silos. So this is all about, and there is a specific action item, but just generally thinking about, where are we siloed and where can we break those down? That is internal and external. So it's within the departments, how can we break it down? But then also it's regionally. So how can we learn from our, sister municipalities or our regional groups like the county and work with them in a more effective way. And then lastly, a culture of proactivity. And so this is about, and this hit on multiple different areas, but this idea of like making sure that we're not like pigeonholing ourselves into like one idea too early on in the strategic planning process. So how that relates to this AI abilities and governance, there was a concern that we might become hyper-focused on one area or one type of AI really early on, and that we would just go with that. And so I think it was this idea of like broadening the landscape initially to hopefully have a better product later on. Financial transparency, again, that's just about making sure we're proactive in understanding how the stakeholders are interested in seeing that information, where they'd like to find that information. There was this idea, and I think these last several were sort of like an overlay against the strategic plan in general, and so it was sort of commentary on that plan in general. And so first off, it is thinking about how the strategic plan aligns with the real and just making sure we're being thoughtful in those two separate efforts and making sure they come together smoothly. Consider removing silos as part of the strategic plan. So there is an action item about like our current efforts, but through our efforts in the strategic plan, are we just going to build up new silos? And so the idea is like for everyone who's walking through their own action plans to just keep that in their minds as they're creating their draft action plan and implementing it. And then lastly, making sure that we have supported and empowered employees across the organizations. If employees feel supported and empowered, we might be able to get work done faster, we might get better work product out of it. And then lastly, and again, this was an overlay generally to the strategic plan as a whole, is to make sure that yes, we're focusing on our action item, but it's always good practice to take a step back when you're on one of those spots and make sure that it aligns with the bigger picture of where the city wants to go.
Thank you. Does anyone have a question? I do think that's fun. Okay, I'm gonna look to our council members. How'd they do? Does that sound like what you shared? Anything that you wanna edit or tweak at all? I saw some heads nodding, which is helpful.
I think she did a great job capturing all the things we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all, no, this is good.
Yeah, excellent presentation.
All right, good job. Well, Eric, can we set the bar? All right, talk to us about. Peter Dorsey.
Okay.
It's
I have
just
one
go
day,
back.
I'll find out. I'm not gonna go in depth as there, it's less about. So I think there were definitely some overarching themes that came out of all the groups. I think one of the key ones was how we're leveraging partnership. I think there also was overlap with, I guess the other as well. So how are we really, number one, understanding what the city's role is in a number of the action items. And then not only what the city's role is, but also what is the impact of the city's role. So as we look at things like addressing homelessness, as the city's role changes, does that have a secondary or tertiary impact on our ability to deliver services? And so really looking at the region as a whole and then leveraging those partnerships. That came out not just with homelessness, but with a number of the action items. Also nonprofit partnerships, how are we leveraging not just regional city and county partnerships, but also nonprofit. A lot of focus on communication and outreach, understanding what our current state is for a number of action items and what our desired future state is and how we can figure that out. And also both the real state and the perceived state. So as it pertains to public safety, how do we address the vote, what's occurring as far as actually in the community versus what the perception of the public is and how we're addressing. One thing that came out of that was what is the footprint of our neighborhood? So how are we communicating with our neighborhood groups? Are we right sizing those engagement opportunities? So there's discussion about sort of do we take this sort of micro level approach versus a very sort of broad macro approach to the community. And how we're addressing leasing. So we have a really clear communication strategy on that page, this community aware of how the station changed that came up. Going back to kind of perception and safety, there's some things that have been occurring already that have had a really strong impact. So these newsletter that has had a good sense of perception of safety. Also looking at some of these action items and projects, what's the visibility of them? What are projects that are highly visible? We also heard, what are the actions that are low hanging fruit that we can easily versus other actions that there may be less public interest in, but have other underlying impact with the city. They're also important for us, although we might not have the same level of direct interest in as the rest of it. That came up over community gardens, other things that we can do quickly and implement sooner in the plan. That was sort of a snapshot of what was discussed. That was in question. We have them multiple pages that we will also try to distill out to.
I think my big question maybe for Rob, and the teams as we move to the next two, I think we've got two already is going back to like what does success look like in February? Like, have we recognized or identified what are the action steps that are a priority from the 65 each of those categories of what you do here?
In my mind, we're a little bit. In my mind, we're really identifying the specifics of what's important, relative priority. And I know you've asked this a couple of times, so I feel like I'm job addressing your question, or we may just not be there yet. But for me, this is as much about the specific actions and kind of deal makers, deal breakers that are important to consider in the plan. So I think we need to think about this idea of relative priority. Because I think maybe there's some feedback, some potential for feedback from a prioritization standpoint.
Let's take that question to the team leads. We asked you to cover a lot of ground in, a 10-15 minute rotation. But I'm wondering, Steve, when we come out to Erica, is there anything that you learned or heard that is gonna you rethink priorities?
So I certainly heard that when we talk about human services, homelessness, those are key topics that there is high priority being filled. So that definitely is multiple groups came to the topic. So certainly if you're asking the team leads to start making some general prioritization, I think we have some information that we can start doing that. I'm not sure that we're at a point where we can correlate that to what will it take from either a budgetary or a sort of workload standpoint. But I think as we call about these action plans, that will start out. But I certainly heard homelessness was a key topic with every group brought forward this year's. Other the human services elements within that sub goal. Public safety definitely came up, but there was also a conversation about there is an aspect of some of these action items that are just fundamental to city operations that aren't necessarily as visible. Especially infrastructure is a good example of that. We're talking about the state of infrastructure. And that may not be replacing water meters. Is not as visible as some of these other things like improving.
Can I tag in really quickly? Cause I think there's kind of two different questions being asked and answered sort of at the same time here in terms of what's happening next with the teams. And then what can the council expect in terms of what's happening with the teams and what you're gonna hear is happening with the teams. And so again, one of the things that's a disadvantage for us right now is we don't have all of the work plans that sort of say, from a team's perspective, here's what I think the key milestones I'm gonna be doing as a team is we will soon be able to extract from those key milestones to sort of say, okay, how is all of the work of these individual teams stacking up over time together, and how are we gonna resource those things to know what that's looking like. I do think once we get those work plans, we'll have a better ability to sort of say, hey, there seems to be a lack of resonance here, action step of thinking about how we put together our neighborhood outreach strategy on public safety doesn't show up in this team's work plan until like a year two priority. That seems out of sync with the level of priority that we heard from the council today, and we've got to match that up. I do think, what is not viable probably in February is for you to dig down into 65 action plans to see all of those unique tasks. I do think that we can in February probably say, hey, across these 65 actions, these 10 actions are sort of in like research and feasibility. These 10 teams are sort of in a planning phase. These 10 teams are in an implementation project delivery phase. And that then can give you more of a quick snapshot of this. We were talking about some of this tension in one of the group I was following. You might be able to then sort of say, hey, this action that I see in sort of feasibility, and research, how can we accelerate that to project delivery more quickly? And so I think we could commit like in February to do lift that out in a better way so that you could expect like when are we going to actually see something being delivered versus some of these are really broad concepts that need peer research, that need feasibility, that need refinement. And so part of it is we've got 65 different things, they're all along that spectrum. We can't exactly describe that to you maybe in the way that is as responsive to your question today. Is that maybe helpful as a framework for our next step?
Thank you. I totally understand that. My mindset going into this meeting was there are 65 action items to support all these goals we all agreed with and then been corrected. What are the 5 in each category, let's say, that are like the first ones that we're working on, so that they become the first deliverables February 2027, or whatever I put that because that was the last stage that Rob had on there, so it's a year will go by very quickly, and we don't want to come to February and say, oh, last year we all agreed that the burgers are great, and so thinking about it, you know what I mean? So like that could very easily happen because it's very, it's a lot going on. So what, out of this meeting, is a staff, or maybe you tell us next month, right? Because there's a lot to digest and work through the next few weeks, but what are we working on? I mean, that's hopefully what I'm trying to understand with my simple understanding.
Did that feedback from Steve, like what you gave him say, hey, we heard human services long clear? If my takeaway from that is like, okay, that team's gonna go back and say, hey, the retreat, the council was really talking a lot about human services, we gotta figure out how to bump that.
Yes, I mean, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So maybe it's team lead thought, these would be my first 5 priorities, and then 5 is the number, my first 3, my first 10 priorities as a team. But actually, we're gonna shift it to these action items are now like in the top 5, and we're gonna prioritize that as a first movement. And here's our goal to be done. Here's what we plan to deliver by February 27. So that was that keep to the plan, and it's truly deliverables happening.
I think that was a helpful dialogue. Thank you, Nancy. I'm going to move it on to Brett. And for the last 2 teams that asked you to kind of keep that reflect back to them. What did you hear in those conversations that is helping you rethink maybe how you're approaching your priorities? That's what we want there. That's who you are. Okay. I was looking for you at that table. Sorry. Sam.
So within our current goals and actions, I circled the actions that popped up the most, so maybe everybody to read those from where you're sitting. All right. As far as key themes that kind of came out, there are 5 core areas. And the good thing was that I think it mostly did line up kind of all of our discussions, mostly lined up with the action items that we already have, but it was helpful to bring forward some specific focuses within those actions as far as what the team's going to look at going forward over the next year and next few years. But obviously, you know, everybody heard me talk a lot about safety. Safety came up a lot. And it's kind of this partnership that we have with TPD as far as the Thornton Police Department, as far as, you know, we can't build our way to a safe city. We can certainly, you know, contribute to that with a lot of the infrastructure improvements, but there's still an enforcement component here that's extremely critical. And so we did receive a lot of feedback about specific corridor enforcement that people want to see, but then also are the infrastructure improvements that we can continue to do that improve the mobility and safety within those corridors. And so that feedback was taken down to help kind of target within these action items and where we're starting with and focusing our priorities over the next year. Another one, this might not be a surprise, but connections really spoke to like the actual connections piece, and it's kind of in the middle here. Feedback as far as like being more direct. So even if I figured out how to get to, you know, A to B, I got to go like this to get there, and that's not really going to move the needle for a lot of folks. And so how do we make it more direct, or even like make it make sense through our trail wayfinding signs? A lot of feedback as far as the safe access across the city, both north, south, and east, west. You know, when you think about trying to get across major corridors, I mean, Highway 7 in a way might as well be a river, and try to figure out how to get across safely for folks. There was this helped too. There was a lot of intentional focus on how do we get to commercial centers, businesses, and stuff. I mean, there's the ancillary benefit that it helps increase revenue for the city by supporting that business, but how the goal and desire to be able to get to commercial business owners, but then also to inline stations was another big one that came up for us. Funding, I really like how Councilmember Martinez ended up saying this. You know, we've been pretty successful with our funding, and there is a lot of money out there, both at the state and federally, for transportation related items. But Councilmember Martinez brought up, like, how can we really position ourselves to be more competitive in pursuing the funding? And so I think that will be a unique lens to look at, like, what are other things we can do to make ourselves appear more competitive, you know, for the projects that we already are submitting and going after to pursue even further here. Because we simply won't be able to, as a city, afford to do this all on our own. Another key theme was with development. So this kind of interacts with Adam's group, BPD, vital purposeful development, but there was a lot of interest, and I know this came up yesterday too, of how council can also leverage their authority and review of going through different developments and trying to push these connections, not just like a connection within the development, but how do we regionally connect these things and really make it make sense. This spoke nicely to the organizational review that we're going through, and so I think council members know that specifically we are trying to stand up the transportation department. And I think that'll really integrate nicely where we're trying to have somebody that's really looking over all this stuff. And so from like a planning component, like when developments are coming in, to working with our counterparts with RTD, with the different, organizations like Dr. Cognata and such, and neighboring communities, but how do we take all that stuff and leverage it together and like actually forming some of these connections? I think we're all doing it individually, but really having a department and a focus on really making sure that this happens. And then I want to also point out, Councilmember Ayala also had a great point as far as instead of forcing, let's say, walkability on the back end, we have opportunities through infill development as an example to make it more walkable now. And so talking about like the area near Brandon Place, Remington, there's still vacant parcels there. How can you maybe infill commercial areas in there? And so people are able to actually walk to their grocery or something else or walk to different services versus, I got to figure out how I make it walkable to get, 10 miles away or something like that. And then the last big piece, coming on the educational and communication standpoint, something, the mayor had brought up and some others as well, is that we need to be really clear and deliberate that we're not through any of these activities trying to decrease the level of service for vehicular travel. We still want to solve congestion. We still want to provide that as an option. But what we're really trying to do is provide other options as well. If you choose to use a vehicle, great. Like hopefully it works out and connects directly for you as well and it's convenient. But if you don't want to, if you want to walk, if you want to bike, if you want to use public transit, that those options are available to you. They're safe, they're meaningful, they're an enjoyable experience. And so communicating that, but then also communicating what we're doing, like what the hell's a road diet, is one of the things that we need to be communicating to also, like once we've completed the projects, hey, did you know this opportunity is available for you? You don't have to like call for an Uber. You can actually connect really conveniently over this way, for example, use this service. And so all that will play into kind of focusing again stuff. I know you obviously cannot read, but it really spoke to 5 or 6 of these key items that Barry had in here, and it's going to help us dial in as far as the priorities for next year.
Great, thank you, Brad. Any questions from this team? Most members, what do you think? Does that sound about right? Do you think they this?
I do want to know, almost every group gave specific feedback on key projects as well, which will be incorporated in here. I just didn't list it as far as the broader recap, but we do have those captured as well.
Yeah, slipper. He had a pretty sweet set.
You ready? All right, so the final group, vibrant, purposeful development. And I think the first key takeaway here that we can all agree on is it's a good thing that computers are invented and I don't have to write everything down. Pretty significant chicken scratch. So you probably can't read that, but I did scroll some quick. Appreciate everybody's feedback. I got some really good takeaways, kind of similar to what Brent said. There's real specific points to each of the actions. We got 19 actions in vibrant, purposeful development. So specific points that we will absolutely take it down. Tim took very diligent notes on it. And we will follow up with some of those and get those kind of get that feedback back to those spot leaders. But there were some key themes that came out from these discussions. So that's kind of what I tried to chicken scratch down here. Overall, it did seem like kind of similar to Erica's. I think everybody's, the general goals and the direction that we were taking these goals seem to generally fit in with the thoughts that council had. Some of the areas that there was some real emphasis, and this was every group, was on the education on the residential housing side, particularly when it comes to the education. So I wrote down a few things I just want to talk about here. Educating the community and the council on a better way to address questions and concerns from residents when these come up. And then on the housing side, and then one idea that Mayor put up house, which was kind of fun. Find a more creative, maybe fun way to get some of this messaging across. So I think that's a a good feedback that we can pass to the SPOT team. Come back with some real policy items and suggestions to council on things that can be done on the residential side, whether that's to process side of things to make it easier to remove some of the barriers. Or just better on the communication side of that. And then diversity in housing, you know, if we've talked about that a lot, but maybe some more of the mixed use, which is one of the goals that we talked about, including some more of that commercial in on some of these projects. So you've got multiple different types, not just one type of housing in one area, but multiple types is really emphasized. So we can get that feedback back to our barriers and fee review and discussion. So that was, everybody seemed to agree with that. A lot of that dovetails in the regulatory justice initiative we spoke about that touches on some of these finding barriers and ways that we can reduce some of these hurdles for businesses and developers to develop the type of projects that we see in the city. And then bring some policy items to council on this, so actionable things that council can vote on and make decisions on that move towards these topics. I did write short-term, long-term prioritization for some of these items. We talked about that already. That was something that kind of came out when you got, just an article on 19 actions. And then gathering spaces are downtown. We seem to really be interested in exploring those components, which was consistent with what we heard before, and continuing to find ways that this ties somewhat into these policy items to make this easier and get the types of development projects that want to see the city built up. And then, so the process improvements for small business, continuing to work with developers on that piece, again, kind of tying that to these policy items, was a big thing. And then one thing I didn't write down that did come up was communicating really closely with connected communities on the parks, component of ours and the trail connections for back over there, making sure that we're not doubling efforts, but that there's some synergy. There's clearly synergies there. We barely got to this in all of my groups because they all went the whole time, but it was our final kind of topic we talked about. Oh, that was one big thing, is making sure that we're communicating pretty strongly with Brett's team, and there's not overlap there, but instead kind of a synergistic relationship. So those are kind of some of the big things we pulled out that seem common. Take other thoughts or questions.
I have questions. I have a question.
Yes.
You said you had some conversations around the short-term, long-term prioritization. Can you elaborate on that? Like anything that came out of your conversations that helped you think about where you would start with those things?
Well, I think some of the common themes, obviously some of the work that's already happening here, since every group kind of spent a fair amount of time on this housing side and trying to make these projects more digestible to the community and thus, for council when they come there. I think then outside of that, there was some some other common themes that I kind of had here that I would think would rise to the top, but there was some individual, priorities too, which we expect, I think, when you're talking about a city of our size and an exciting topic, like but I would say that everybody has things that they want to focus on too. And so, how do we better kind of work through those and prioritize those? I think is something that that Tansy addressed earlier, I think we'll get to, but when it comes to some of these bigger picture items, there were certainly things that came up to the top. It's education, it's working with developers to get the types of projects that we want to see. I think those are things that we're already starting to do, but they continue to prioritize those items.
Council members, what do you think? Anything missing? Anything you want to elaborate on?
Yeah, I know in our group, we mentioned being clear about the definition of terms are being used. Did that come up as a thing? And if so, what do you think that takeaway or next step would be?
Yeah, I think I kind of put some of that into this education piece, but as far as being very clear on when we talk about certain types of housing, what we're talking about here, and I think that's a huge component of how we get such communication activity. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, elaborate on the definition.
Well, so
the housing.
Well, yeah, so there is the phrase affordable housing, and we talked about there is the term affordable housing, as some people will perceive that as government subsidized housing, and then, but at the same time, we might actually mean affordable housing, meaning we're building things that are cheaper that people can buy at a lower price. And having that whole spread of spectrum of options. So. I just wanted, well, I brought that up and it was kind of a discussion point, so it's like, how do we make that clear that our strategic plan. Is talking about the spectrum of housing opportunities, not just government subsidized housing as the priority.
Yeah.
Because that's gonna be a big topic. Come up a lot.
Agreed, I think that's a really good point. I think as we talk about education, we talked about how do we better. How do we better position that messaging out to the community, so.
And I guess like for me, I also wanna make sure that I'm not the only one that's thinking this way. If the priority is government subsidized affordable housing, then tell me that, but I look at it as the spectrum of an opportunity.
Yeah, I think.
Now we all see it, but
I'll let other council members, and I did seem to be kind of any other thoughts from council about?
what's what I mean? Okay, so yeah, I see affordable housing. Government subsidized as a part of the spectrum, an element of the spectrum. And so that priority or that action step that we're talking about is towards that entire spectrum, not just one facet of it.
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties, you might handle my handwriting in an order this small, so raising the diversity in housing, I think it's kind of a little bit what you're talking about, the different types and education of what that looks like. Fair?
Is there anybody who sees it differently who wants to speak up?
Maybe using a different word, maybe using obtainable housing. And not keep it under there because everybody's mindset is set to that. And if we start messaging a different word, maybe then everybody's mind will turn differently. And stop using that word.
Yeah, we have, we have our housing choice study going on, which is about sort of the diversity of housing. So maybe, something like starting to pivot to housing choice and access or something that is that, it's the kind of messaging you're looking for.
Okay, and maybe it's, you continue discussing, what the right term is, but I do like. If there is an opportunity to change it, so it is the spectrum. I think that'll help.
Very good.
Thank you. Is that? Also, nice support each other. If you were a note taker for your team, please make sure that that worksheet comes back to you or to Megan. We are gonna go around and capture snapshots of all of the chicken scratch as well, and we will have responsibility on translating that into a report. So you will get the opportunity to reflect on these things again. We are going to break now for lunch until 12:30, so we have a 30-minute break for lunch. I encourage you to use that time to reset and refresh, but also to continue the dialogue. If you wanna hop up, go around, look at the things that you can read from where you're sitting and continue the conversation with your colleagues and the staff. That's what this time is for. So enjoy your 30-minute break until 12:30.
Yeah, well. My wife was messing with me, say, why the police in the house last night?
Thanks again, we're gonna get going. I know your agenda says icebreaker, we're just taking advantage of time, we're gonna skip that, move into the municipal discussion. So I'm gonna hand it off to TNC to introduce this. I give it to.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, everybody. So, I'm gonna kick this off, but this is gonna be a team effort between the judge and Tammy, and so, knew there was some interest in the council and just thinking about the future of the court. We just had a work session a couple of weeks ago, just so that we all came in with sort of a baseline understanding of what are the court operations, what are some of the stressors and challenges on the court, what is the work that is happening
within management services and with the judge to sort of respond. And, what are the ways that the rest of the organization, ultimately, we very purposely called this, municipal justice. Because really, well, this is it's an ecosystem that impacts everything from the court, police, code enforcement, prosecution within the police department, and all of those systems surrounding that. And so ultimately, we have framed this discussion today around the municipal court master plan that was included in the budget for this year. But certainly, open to broader discussion and feedback. But we felt like this was a nice way to anchor the discussion about what are our opportunities, our challenges, our vision for the court going forward. We are going to start by just talking about, again, when we think about those systems, what's the philosophy that underlies those? Because they all really work together, again, in the context of this broader system. So I'm going to start by just sort of talking about the general enforcement philosophy. And so collaborated with, the police chief and code enforcement to sort of describe, and actually probably for the first time, kind of have written this down to sort of say, what are some of the underlying values of the way that we approach enforcement. Certainly differences, in terms of the systems, but I think a shared philosophy. Tammy's gonna kind of pop up and she'll do the same thing in terms of the philosophy of the prosecution team. And then the judge will grab that for the court. And again, I think you'll see a lot of synergy of the way those philosophies work together to support a system. We did include money in the budget for 2026 for what, initially we thought were maybe going to be some pretty narrow questions about the future of court. Just as a reminder, the judge had proposed the addition of a probation officer for the 2026 budget. We decided we didn't feel confident in making that investment, wanted to have a better understanding of kind of the workload impacts, other secondary impacts, what would that mean in terms of future investment before we made that investment? So we had budgeted a master plan to help try to anticipate those things. Since then, I think we've identified a lot of other opportunities that we can leverage this planning process to make sure, kind of like we just had the conversation on the strategic plan, how are we aligning our resources, our programs with the community's goals and with the council's goals? And so, the judge will be walking through those in a lot more detail through this presentation. So when it comes to enforcement, and I think some of this conversation came up yesterday. So first thing is clearly, the city has regulations, laws that we enforce that have penalties associated with that. And that is clearly a strong part of our enforcement. But we have also gotten a lot of feedback from the council and have created a lot of new programs and capacity to sort of say, how can we make sure that the community understands these rules? How can we give the community more tools to be compliant? So things like code cap, where we can actually help people with financial assistance, to come into compliance, more outreach in terms of, road place safety, those kinds of things to sort of say, the goal here is not to penalize people, the goal is compliance. And so in lots of ways, we've worked that. I think one of the things that came up in the conversation yesterday is how do we continue to build that portfolio of work to increase success and compliance on the front end to complement that. The second piece is, and I know the council has been in the loop on some of these, ultimately, a lot of times, a really complex neighborhood solution or problem, it's not one single department that necessarily is the solution there. I think you've all have, your own stories of, a pain point in the community that had code enforcement issues, it had law enforcement issues. It might have other, interactions with mental health kinds of systems. And so increasingly that, the way to be successful on some of these very complex issues is we've got to have our problem solvers in the city attorney's office and across our city departments to be able to do that. Again, one of the things that I think we've recognized, again, in the reorg, in the strategic plan, is we've got to continue to build the capacity for those kind of cross-departmental coordinations and strategies to be able to address these issues in our community. Again, we build processes that ultimately can result in an enforcement activity. But in those processes, again, some of this are things under state law in terms of notices for compliance, opportunities for people to be able to address those issues, making sure that we have appropriate documentation so that if it comes to enforcement process, that we are going to be successful and building accountability. And so there's a lot of systems work that balance all of those things in terms of giving somebody an opportunity to comply, building a case that can be successful, that then ultimately might end up in some kind of pieces. The other piece, is the front end of all of this. And I know this is, we talked about customer service just now too. Again, how do we make the easiest pathways for our community to raise these concerns to our issue to us? So, whether that's online crime reporting or better, easier portals into the code enforcement process. I know one of the things we've heard a lot about from the council is how do we make follow-up more visible on those things as they come into those processes. And so again, I think that's an area where, we've started to make some investments, but I think everybody in the room would agree there's more room to grow there. Again, I think again, an area of priority, when you look across all of our tools is, we will always to some degree be a response-driven organization. So, people call us, let us know about concerns and we respond to those. I think certainly fire department, police department, code enforcement, there isn't a department in the city that hasn't tried to make more space and room for more proactive efforts in that. There's a tension point there in terms of how much resourcing can we do to these efforts to grow that proactive portfolio. One of the things that you will see on your look ahead is a conversation about code enforcement. We have done some peer research just to help show that balance in Thornton and compare that to others in the region. So, continue that to pull that policy lever about, how many resources are we going to dedicate here. And then last, and this is a place where we will accelerate in some ways as, the council supported a new computer aided dispatch and records management system. We'll be going into that next year. Some of those are gonna, and you saw on the strategic plan, things about like, how are we gonna use technology long-term in our enforcement? Again, I would say this is an area in terms of philosophy that is growing. How are we using data? Again, when it comes to all of these other elements to best leverage our resources. So I did just want to pause here, from the staff's perspective, this is how we would articulate the philosophy. But I think as we went through these, we did want to just make sure that these things resonated with the council in terms of the direction you believe that you're giving to the staff in terms of how we build these systems. Hearing no feedback, I'm gonna hand it to. Yeah.
100% right.
As council probably knows, under the charter, the city attorney is responsible to oversee and manage all of the lawsuits that are brought against the city or that the city desires to bring. And a substantial portion of that is also the prosecution of municipal code violations. So we have 3 attorneys that are designated to do just that, prosecute municipal code violations. And they see actually thousands, as does the court, of criminal misdemeanors, traffic violations, code violations. Involving adults, juveniles, animals, building inspections, property maintenance, fire code cases. Cases against trailer parks, any manner of a violation under municipal code. So, and oftentimes the prosecutors are the first time that the process gets explained to defendants, to sometimes residents, citizens. They have, they explain what the violation is, they explain their options in court. And we try to do that in a very professional and responsive manner. We take customer service, even though they are defendants, very seriously in that process. Oftentimes we are able to offer a plea at that juncture, but of course, some cases go clear through for trial. Our prosecutors emphasize holistic problem solving in partnership with the community, the victims, and city departments to prevent reoffense and ensure justice and offender accountability. An example of that is oftentimes we get a bulk of violations from, for example, a high school on bullying or vaping, things like this. And our prosecutors, this is what really jazzes them up, work to develop a program in concert with our court and our enforcement officers, where they can go through a workshop for a number of days and learn about this situation. I think Adam even reached out to a theater company, a nonprofit theater company that worked through some scenes with some of these alleged juvenile offenders in the course of learning about, the issue they were charged with, bullying or vaping or whatever. So they get jazzed up about that, and then again, students get through that program, their charges are typically dismissed by them. So that's one of the things that takes the cooperation and really the coordination, our code enforcement, our police, the prosecutors, and the municipal court. So it's a reason why I think this plan has to be a justice comprehensive plan, so that we can analyze what each of our staffs are doing and the programs that the court has and the court is desiring, and make sure that we use all our resources effectively. They also serve as legal advisors, our prosecutors and trainers to the police department, our code responders, animal control, code compliance, liquor licensing authority, marijuana licensing, and building inspection, and the homeless outreach team. So those are other jobs of our prosecutors to advise throughout the organization. Again, another need for a combined municipal justice plan going forward. And now I'll turn it over to our judge.
Unless there's feedback.
Unless you have feedback, lady.
So it was important that these ladies came up as well, because this is a municipal justice plan. And I love that the exercises that we did before are really the same skill sets or tools that we need to hone this down on what our municipal justice looks like. When I was in the state system for 17 years, most as a state prosecutor, I didn't even know municipal courts existed. And then, so that's now, they are so on the forefront and such a large part of what we do. So thank you for walking through this, all of you. And it's really important to know the philosophy of each of these areas, so that as you're making the decision on how to be good stewards of the budget line item for the master plan, you are saying, we need to narrow this down, let's grab these ideas as well. And it's been an incredible exercise with these two ladies, because we were originally thinking, what more information do we need to know if we should launch a probation department? Oh, wait a minute. We should also look at our case management system. Oh, wait, and we should look at our judicial capacity and the office and the buildings and all that. So it's really thorough. So when we look at the municipal court philosophy, this is this is more coming from me of my exposure of being on the municipal bench for 9 years. But I'll say this at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, this is council's municipal court. So if you go through and you look at these philosophies and you're thinking, this really doesn't align with what we as a collective group think that our municipal court should be, then this is a really good time space to have those lens or discussions. So I'm gonna go through them to function in a way that incorporates best practices and is aligned with legal authority. The legal authority one is easy. That's objective. That's a mandate. It comes out from council, from state, from Supreme Court. We have to follow. It's this other one, best practices. That's subjective. So what does that look like? Is waiting in court half hour too long? Is waiting in court 2 hours too long? Should victims of all crimes, be it business, Walmart, assault, should they have victim advocate assigned? What are those best practices and should we be implementing those in what degree? To create a space where individuals are heard, provided answers and treated with dignity and respect. I mean, I think that would be across the board for all of us. Our customers are unique. Many of them are residents of Thornton, traffic offenses. A lot aren't as well. They're popping through 9801 Grand Street at Walmart. I was told that's the most stolen from Walmart in US. Is it still the most? Because I've been saying that now for 4 years. Is it still? Fascinating. So, did you all know that 9901 Grand Street Walmart is the most stolen from Walmart in all of the US? So I personally gone into that Walmart and said, can I speak with some, people who know people? Let's have a conversation about how to coordinate with Walmart. What are we doing? As a collective effort. So I will say that in court, when I have shoplifting after shoplifting, and you can just hear this big gasp of the audience behind, and it's fascinating, the messaging. So I'm virgin out for a minute. I know we were gonna have a quick public speaking, or hold on, we were gonna have a quick icebreaker. And then it went away, and I was like, and someone said, are you gonna do an icebreaker? So I was like, I know what we can do. Public speaking. There is not a single person in this room that does not public speak. Would you agree with that? In some form or fashion, yes? So then I was thinking that the really awesome, when I watch you guys public speak, you all did so well. And is there anyone in this room who does not get nervous when you public speak? To some degree, yes? Everyone does. So years back, right before COVID, I went to Bangladesh. And I was sent there, it's like a 35-hour trip on a plane, long time, to teach judges in Bangladesh on this rule of law program. It wasn't to say, start westernizing yourself. It was to say, here are some options on how you can get rid of your 3.1 million backlog cases. Point being, I get up there and I see this room of individuals from Bangladesh, and I'm all feeling whatever the word is, inept, I don't know. Just how am I supposed to come up here and teach you all on a different country, different language, all of that, on what we're doing? And it was coming from, I was municipal court at that time, right? So 2 things, this is your quick icebreaker, is my focus wasn't on me. What do I look like? What do I sound like? What are people thinking about me? It was, what is my message? I have been given, I'm the vessel to teach you all, not you guys, but the individuals in Bangladesh, these concepts that if some of these resonate, you can be change makers. So it's really important that I focus on this stuff. So now I'm not focusing on me. So it starts to go away, right? And then it's that physical energy that you can just feel in your gut. You physically push it down and you literally feel it start to leave your body. Does that make sense? Okay, where was I before I went on that icebreaker? Where was I? I can't remember either. Okay. Pardon? Shoplifting. That was so good. Okay. So as a judge, the things that I say, this goes to public speaking. I don't get minutes to think about what I have to say. It's so in the moment, what comes out. And then I have to try to resonate with the person that's in front of me, so you don't go back to 9901 Grand Street and shoplift again. So I'm trying to explain that to the community members that are sitting in there. We have the most stolen from Walmart in the entire US. I don't know how many Walmarts there are, but that's a shocking statistic.
And we also see the most incredible human beings come through that door. Hundreds of them on a daily basis. Do you know what I mean? So it's being able to message like, wow, this is a big deal. And all of you that just gasped that are here as well for something, shoplifting, assault, or traffic, we still have an amazing community that we're all working to lift up together. Make sense? Okay. To manage all facets of our court operations in a way that ensures an efficient and effective access to justice. So I'll pop this up a little bit later. That like most all departments, case management system, ours is called full court. I'll get into that a little bit later. You need case management system to manage the 16,000 plus cases that come through. Thank you, Chief. And we have to be able to, before we have physical files, we just flipped to electronic in October. Physical files, so if you don't know the layout of our court, you need to come, that's number one. Number two is the court specialists are on the top floor. The judicial chambers and courtrooms on the bottom floor, right? So 2 different floors. So when a physical file needed to come around, call it a widget, whatever it is, think of the physical file doing this all day long, right? And so many emails saying, does anyone know where the Bob Jones file is? What? So much time. So we needed to flip over, but the flipping has been challenging to where if before I could do 120 cases in a 4-hour period, now I'm at 60. So not really the intended value, and there's a solution there somewhere, but it speaks to the master plan. We need some attention in that space because before what wasn't efficient courthouse. So if council members start getting some phone calls saying, I don't know why I waited for 4 hours, know that in the master our eyes are on. Okay. Define a just resolution unique to each case by giving full consideration to community safety, receptiveness, and accountability of the offender, ability to rehabilitate, and ability to comply. So I will often hear this, and I don't agree with it. We have associate judge interviews a couple of weeks ago, and they say, you know, municipal court is really that place where people start off in their criminal career. Wrong. If you look at individuals who are with us, not traffic, I'll skip out of that, but who are committing assaults, harassment, disorderly conduct, anywhere from 5 to 100 cycles on the criminal history sheet. They're just sort of all over the place. Chief, you don't have to agree with me. You agree with me? Just say yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, in some respects, are they on the beginning and trying things out? Yes, but in many respects, are these people have mental health and addiction issues? And they're also being a little bit savvy about if I commit a shoplifting that's under 300, I'm probably going to go to municipal court, maybe. To take an innovative approach that is authentically responsive to Thornton community needs. So that's where you've heard a little bit about the 2 initiatives that our collective departments have been involved in. One is House Out of the Court. That's our Thornton Fresh Start Court, and it answers to homeless individuals who are committing crimes based upon being in a house. The other one was the Expo. I hope all of you know about all that, and if you've attended, awesome. And that's over at the AG Church. I'm pointing like it's right behind me, but it's not. And that's where it helps the same population, but they don't have to be associated with a criminal offense, okay? So as we go through these slides to keep a look at, okay, awesome, you're serving unhoused individuals. What about vets? What about mental health? What about addiction? So that's where I will not be up here persuading or trying to sell something. We need feedback on what do you want your court to look like. Recap, when we met on January 20th, that was to set the ground stage for the conversation that we're having today. And we went over these things, so I'm going to highlight them briefly just so you can grab the information that we discussed at that time. The mission and vision, really this is a growth opportunity in so many ways. Thornton is growing. How is our court going to offensively respond? And if we don't respond proactively, then if the court messes up, it's something like we aren't issuing these warrants on all these individuals who fail to appear. So they stay out in the community without a warrant, without being pulled back in, or a warrant gets issued that shouldn't get issued. So if there's some consequences where we need to stay proactive. Case types talked about this, that we have the lower class misdemeanors, traffic, not all traffic. We don't do DUIs and driving under restraints, but your speeding, careless driving, reckless driving. code enforcement, so it's just keeping an eye on, do we need to do an analysis of what types of cases that we handle? Revenue, largely based on traffic cases they could chief. Remember that this can ebb and flow, it was a huge increase this past year, and that's outstanding, and I'll always say with this, the court is never to be viewed as a revenue generating entity. It's then you start to improvise its means of justice and the reason that it's there. Spotlight, municipal courts are under a microscope. Remember how I said, I didn't even know there were municipal courts, and I was a prosecutor in the state system. Now it's changed, and legislation, all of it, we're on the forefront ACLU. And that's not to say that now we really got to get it right, but eyes are on if we're getting it right or not. Innovative programming, those are the two that we talked about, keep an eye on if we want to expand that or shrink it. And then operations, everything we do certainly touches the police department, touches the city attorney's office. And I'm gonna just invite a concept could be when the warrants. When people come to municipal court, that shouldn't be, I'm making this up. That shouldn't be a place where we issue warrants. You should be sending out letters, which we do, for individuals to be reminded to come back to court. We do that on the first time they fail to appear. Second time now we do a personal recognizance warrant. It's a notice saying you missed, not a notice. It's a warrant that doesn't have them taken into custody. They're given notice of their next court date. The third time now we're going to capture surety. That's not a mathematical certainty. If someone's on an assault and they fail to appear the first time, that can go right to a capture surety. So I just want to build. Point being is, if council have a philosophy, we can make this an all show cause court, then that changes the structure of what we do. Okay, so again, the main reason why we're here is growth. We have growth population, and any other of these aspects can impact what we do. So I've heard drones, wherever that lands, no pun intended, that could mean more, less activity, and then how does the court pivot proactively so that we're managing that side of enforcement. I'm trying to be frugal of your time, so any legislation that comes, and that's whether it's at state or city council. So city council has had conversations about what do we do with these encampments? And that's where some of the awesome conversations were this morning over in that corner, that Thornton on its island can say, we're going to outlaw, make it illegal for any encampment. I'm making this up, but now the individuals are going to go to North Bend. Well, North Bend is the same thing. Well, now they're going to go to Commerce City. So what is that regional response where we are taking all factors into consideration? And this is one of the most complex issues that is out there. The technological, I touched on that, so I won't hit it again. Data and technology enhancing in policing. I think you guys are moving into a new case management system as well, so yes?
Ideally, yes. That's part of that. We're waiting for the CAD RMS system upgrade, and we'll see which modules we end up with.
Yes. And then a marrying of the two. All right. So the master plan budget line item, this was what council had approved, and again, assessment of the justice system at all levels, not just where it sits in the court, although the court of course is centric to it. And then places for it to be, the whole system to be evaluated. These are the four we're going to touch on briefly. The black lines, the recommendations, I'll touch on that. The intergovernmental impacts and strategy, address current and emerging technologies and new justice programs and responses, or doing something with what we have going on right now with our programs and initiatives. So talking on realignment of administrative responses of the court, I'm not here to say that the court structure should come under the presiding judge. You will hear me say, you will never hear me use my name. This structure has to make sense regardless of the individuals who fulfill these roles. So whether it's myself, Tansy, Chris, JJ, our court administrator, the structure needs to make sense. So it is a master plan that takes a look at, does it make sense for the current system to exist the way it is? And just so it all makes sense to everyone, we're all on the same page. The 14, 15 associate judges, I supervise them. And then the administrative staff reports to Chris, who reports to Tansy, so it's housed in the city manager's office. And then these are some considerations that need to be taken into account when that conversation happens and the decision is made. So we would be asking the Black Line, or I'm sorry, the master plan to take a look at Black Line's recommendations. So it's certainly not coming from a solo me, but what is best practices. Broomfield recently switched to the model of going under the presiding judge, so there's opportunity to get some peer information now that they've been running in that space. Okay. Looking at intergovernmental impacts and strategies is an officer has discretion largely if something can be filed in municipal court or state court on a lot of your lower level offenses. We do message if it can be filed in municipal court, get it in municipal court. And the city council has the purview to shape what your ordinances look like. And we just work from that, not just, but whatever is developed through the ordinances is what we manage within the system. But council can say, we're gonna put a sentencing cap on this offense. We don't want this on our books at all. We want all this going to county court. So it's just keeping those considerations in mind. Are we handling the cases that you want us to handle? Well, program impacts, if there is an appetite for us to be more programmatic, meaning we know the two courts that are going. If you were to ask the ACLU, they would say we want municipal courts to be specialty courts across the board. And so we literally would be running the Veterans Court, the Mental Health Court, Substance Use Court, Homeless Court, and that would be the space that we fill. So it's just another philosophical way to look at what's our purpose here. Technologies and facilities. So our case management system talks through that well enough. The intent is outstanding. The case management system that we have right now just may be too truncated and too complicated to fulfill what we're trying to do to make sure that we are running an efficient court process. Integration opportunities with cross department impacts and systems. I think that speaks for itself. And then courtroom facility and office impacts of growth. So if we were to gain a probation department, obviously considerations have to be made. Is there a place to put them? What does that look like? They're meeting with clients who could be more at risk. Is there security access? Things of that sort. And then if you were talking about additional court specialists, FTEs being added, judicial support being added, it's the building structure that needs to be taken into consideration as well. This is the current programs that we have. I'll go through those first. We already do have diversion and restorative justice. So quickly, if someone is charged with an offense, city prosecutor's office can say, I'm going to offer you diversion. You do these things, class, community service hours, and you get to divert the court system, AKA me. And if you do all of these things, your case gets dismissed. Awesome opportunity as long as they comply. Then we have sort of a gradation of the system's responses, but that's considered restorative justice. We have mediation, also restorative justice. You get with your neighbor, the complaining party, you sit down at the table, let's talk through this, provide proof that you've done that, your case can get dismissed. Often we see that the complaining party is the one that's not willing to participate. And then our court and fresh start court, we know all about it. So that I've plugged in, this is not me trying to advocate for it, but a consideration to be made should be supervisory responsibility of sentencing conditions remain with the judge, should those be turned over to a probation officer. Okay. Questions, thoughts, concerns? Yes.
Is it a question for us, council, that we're okay with the master plan, or we're already doing a master plan?
So we are, unless, and this is more a Tansy question, that council was like, that was the worst decision we've ever made. it can probably be pulled off the books. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's all up for grabs.
We're gonna do an exercise too.
And then a little like what the stations look like, what do you want the master plan to look like? Does that make sense?
That teed me up so beautifully, thank you.
You want that, good? Okay.
Can I have the? Yes, okay, so, it's like after lunch, you have a lot of information thrown at you. So we're gonna do a little exercise to help you digest a lot of what you heard here. What we're gonna do is we're gonna have some table conversations at your table. Councilmember Russell, I'm gonna ask you to pop up and maybe switch seats with Amy, so we have 2 council members at each table. And basically we'll play a version of Jeopardy, okay? You have to give the answers in the form of a question. So I guess you just have some conversation at your table about what you heard, what stood out to you from the presentation. And talk about and think about what are the top 3 questions you hope are addressed by the master. So come up with your top 3 kind of consensus at your table, and then we're gonna do a report out. Okay, we've got 2 council members at each table. We really love this conversation to be kind of council led. I'm gonna ask a council member at each table to do the report outs. But staff members, you're there to help give feedback and be part of that dialogue too. All right, any questions? Well, we're gonna give you like 10 minutes for your table conversations and then we'll report back.
And I'm like, we're at an advantage here, because. Or is it a disadvantage? No, it's an advantage. Okay. There's not 3 questions.
I think the increased volume of cases and maybe of adding probation programs and stuff like that, whether that's something we want to handle and expand our important questions, so expansion and new staff, new space, new volume. Yeah.
So if we're going to maybe expand the court to handle the new volume.
Yeah, and along those lines, I know you mentioned the question is, you brought it up before about doing domestic violence, like Westminster. And of course, that would require significant investment from the city to do that. But it would be interesting to know what the gains are for our community by doing those cases at the municipal level. This, as far as I understand, it's versus well, that's where serious cases are.
If it, if there's DV cases in, if there was a serious bodily injury or deadly weapon.
Yeah, so, that's always been an interesting thing, to see different cities handle it different, I think Aurora moved out, put it all on the 2 counties they're in. Westminster has their own, so they're in 2 counties also. It's just an interesting question. It would have a serious impact on the board.
That's all you get,
Is number 1, do you want that, I think break that down at all, should we expand as court to handle the new volume? Because you started talking about probation, FTE and physical, do you want me to add those components?
Yeah. A lot of my questions come down to, what are the advantages expanding was like court versus sending things off the county. What are the big benefits for residents? How do you put that in the big list of priorities of greater? How does that compare against other issues? It's harder to understand for most people, including myself, what the everyday person, how that would impact them versus, you know, obviously go to the Thornton building, so right? But what else? What else does that mean?
Yeah, I don't know if this shows what I was thinking about, it was, what's the return on investment? You know, you're making an investment in this process to better it in some way, shape or form, so what are those tangible returns on that investment? Can you quantify some less follow, you know, and then what happens with people? How do you try to quantify that?
Yeah. A little off topic, but I was actually curious, when you were talking about the different collaboration within the different departments of, like, are there, will this work look at opportunities that we're not taking advantage of, or opportunities that we don't even know about, I agree. I think between code and your staff and police and I miss somebody legal, do really well, but you know, other opportunities. I mean, for some reason, could HR, we've never talked about that, but could HR help with like training or anything like that? Yeah. Are there other opportunities that we have that we don't have? Yeah, because opportunities we can control and ones that maybe we can't, but. You might have more success with the judges listening to you than me. No, I don't hear that at all. I remind them all the time. Don't do those, please do that.
So another question is, how much flexibility is there in the procedures of the court? I know there's legal mandates you have to follow. Here's a concrete example: is one person came in to the court who was a victim, and it was very important for this person to address the, like, to address how, but then case was beat out, so he didn't have that opportunity. So if it had gone through that pathway, so what flexibility do you have out that or other types of changes? But
it's a good question. So if I go in assuming positive intent and ask questions, I want to communicate that person. Did you have to to let someone at the court know that you wanted to speak, but did something so that you could share your thoughts?
Yeah.
I'd be curious what that answer was. Could we have done and not? There's so many ways. Right. They can send an email to the prosecutor. And this is getting a little bit. I can't hear anything about the facts until the trial. So I can't take it. I have to take support letter and read it ahead of time. Because now I'm not a link. So for both sides, I've seen links. But if the case comes through and the person pleads guilty, now we can hear anything. And so if the person were to have written an email, then that could be, at that point, the prosecutor can send them to the court, or they can be there, and hopefully they told the prosecutor, may I speak at anything, and then the prosecutor will communicate this individual wants to speak. Does that make sense? I think that's what we're saying. Totally lost her. Yeah. So it's difficult because they're all our customers, defendants, victims, jurors, everyone's our customers. And it's businesses and individuals, and then how are we messaging to a neighbor that got hit by a dog? So it's
yeah, my question is more general about what degree of flexibility is there in doing hey, 'cause I know there's probably not all that, but you mentioned the great news. And those are the areas that we touch up. To help people understand what their policy is. I wonder if the biggest challenge people face in understanding what's happening. I don't think anybody expects to have a grand old time in court. No, that's actually a good thing because expectations are pretty low. You know, it's like people can have a a bad service and that's what they expected, so it's not a big deal. Even though we want them to get better, there's also, that's an advantage. It's, I see it as an advantage because we're starting to, people don't think they're gonna have a really smooth court process.
It'd be like going to the DMV,
Yeah.
like getting processed.
Yeah. I mean,
That's a bit of the beauty of what we do.
Yeah.
Is we still provide you personable, informative service in a situation that is. Sometimes I won't say fully, I really am not up here still uphold, you know, so that's, this is for. You can uncover 5,000 lots of. I mean, yeah, I think. And you was
Yeah.
Attention, please. We want to hear what you have been talking about in your groups. So we're gonna start back here in this corner. Everyone got quiet. Let's focus. So Gilmore Morris, did you draw the short stuff?
I did.
Awesome. Share with us your 3 questions that you came up with. Start, just so you know, we're not writing these on the whiteboard or anything. Megan is back here taking notes. She's gonna capture all of these so we can reflect them back to you. Go ahead.
The reason I got is, what is the?
Yeah.
You got that. We actually were, over achievers, so we agreed for questions.
We have 5. How many you got?
We can narrow it down. I think that, the consensus among the council members, I would say, is that we would agree that the court is kind of a silo. Like in a bucket of its own, we don't really know what's going on in some capacity. So the big question would be, well, as we work through it, like, what are some of the budget implications of this master plan? What priorities come out of, what priorities are coming out based on budget constraints? That's one question. Number 2, what is the timeline for implementation as well? Let's see. Big one, because we're obviously talking about strategic planning. How does this municipal plan tie into strategic plan? And how does it support one of those focus areas? And then, of course, how do we actually measure success? And track ROI outcomes.
Wonderful, thank you.
Right.
Okay, so I'll say the first one is assessing the impact of new ordinances on the city's like resources and like as far as staff and like cost. So like we try to solve problems by creating new laws, but are those laws really fixing the problem ultimately? You know, what is the impact financially on the city? And it kind of goes back to like the stick and carrot conversation from yesterday, but just kind of, it's like, I think code enforcement's a good one. We've created some more codes to our, ordinances to have some, cleanup efforts specifically like in South Dakota, for example, around cars and things like that, being on the roads. but it's a lot of enforcement, and then if we can't keep up with that enforcement and prosecution, and then the cost to that, like, what is that? Is that really fixing the problem, big picture strategy, or are we just creating work that we can't complete? So that was the first one. The second one is the advantages and disadvantages, like really knowing what they might need to have domestic violence handled in our municipal court. So I've heard that kind of, I just wanted, like, I'm more looking at like from an investigative stance of like asking questions, like what would that look like? What would the cost look like? What would we do better than the county? What might we not be able to do that the county could do better than us? Those kind of things. And then.
Yeah, basically the question, like what librarian, what Mayor Pro Tem says is like what we can do, what can the county do, but obviously we take on more at the municipal level, that's gonna create more work for our staff, and that could divert, unintentionally negatively divert resources that go to other areas. But obviously, in that situation, we need to have conversations with the county. We can't just say, okay, we're not doing it anymore. This is your problem. That we can't do it that way either. So we have to have the dialogue with the county to see, okay, what cases can they take on that we're, I won't say unable to do as a city, but what can we do to be more effective at restorative justice in both levels?
Not it, did you have one more?
I think those were great.
Yeah, that was 3. I think so, yeah. That was it.
Yeah,
Awesome.
we got in depth, so we didn't get time to do the overachieving the 4 and 5 part. Yep, but
I love teamwork in this team, you helped each other, that was great. And definitely a theme of really being thoughtful about how decisions impact your resources and your budget. All right, let's come up to this table.
Okay, we actually had very similar questions to the last group. One of the main themes of a couple of our questions is, what's the ROI of investments into this court system? So to expand on that, what does ROI mean when you're talking about the criminal justice system, especially at the municipal level? And what are the net gains in utility or net gains and just satisfaction overall, and how it fits into all the other elements of the city? Understanding that is a number one question we had. And we also had essentially the same question about domestic violence cases, because we have a neighboring city, Westminster, that does domestic violence cases in the municipal system. The city of Aurora used to do that. They moved it out to the county. And so just understanding what does that mean to have that, how does that impact our residents, our businesses, all the people that are involved in the court system, and just helping us understand what those differences are. And then we did have a different kind of question about the processes and procedures of the court system, and are they understandable to the people affected by that system? And I guess the direction we're going is, how can we better inform people who are involved in a process that is generally negative experience for them, but how can we keep them involved and informed about what's happening? And we see that leading to a better outcome.
I love you were really thoughtful about saying, what do we need by ROI? And then are we getting that ROI? That was really interesting. And of course, yes, again, some consistent themes. I mean, all of the table so far said something about how does this fit into the bigger picture of our strategic plan and how we allocate resources. So, great, thank you. Round of applause. Okay.
All right. Long-time listener, first-time caller. So the 3 questions we came up with was, when will we need another full-time court? Was it something we now? Is this just a plan for futurely? What is the correct balance of restorative justice and traditional justice? And then how do we decide, and what are the steps to move the court administration under the judge of court system? Is that something we need to get processing now in order to make sure that it happens?
All right. Any other questions that maybe were sparked by what you heard through the report?
I have a clarifying question, possibly yours. Another full-time, well, that's the first question, another full-time.
Full-time court?
Court.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
Yes. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I know that was a quick exercise, but we really kind of thought that was a good way to quickly get some input that will funnel back to the staff team to help them prepare and draft the scope for how this plan comes together. To give you more information to really think on these decisions as we move forward. Okay, we are winding down. We are about to land this plane. Thank you so much to all of you for your very hard work today. If you're feeling a little bit exhausted, that's good. That's by design. That means we've accomplished some good hard work together today. So for our last exercise together, we really just want to have a moment of reflection. And in the interest of time, we're going to start with the council members. And Kristen, if I could get your help, I left my clicker over there. Can you advance to the next slide? Yeah. We're just going to go around. I'm going to ask each of the council members to share what's something that you will be carrying forward with you from today. It doesn't have to be just today, over the retreat, anything from yesterday too. Just something that you learned, something that's kind of weighing on your mind over all the work that you've done that you are really going to hang on to and carry with you this retreat experience. So, Councilmember Allen,
I think, like, I was just looking through like the materials this morning for the strategic plan and the accomplishment and my I think the kind of like the theme I've had is like, how do we celebrate the things we've done, but also get folks to understand that the way we do things may not exactly be the way we envision it really super quick because it is government, but like that we do have a plan to address the needs for the future. So I think it's more about like communications and helping folks feel educated and understanding of what's going to happen in the future of our city.
I think that's awesome. You've said that word celebration several times over the past couple of days. And, you know, Megan and I do this work with lots of cities and lots of groups. And I think I've definitely observed a camaraderie here, the way you all are like applauding for each other and some of the teamwork and the discussions that I think is special and kind of taking that sense of teamwork out to your community. I think it's a really nice thing. So thank you for sharing that. All right, you have another question.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for facilitating this. You guys did a great job. So the first time. So I shared with a couple folks my take, you know, like under my breath, so I'm not in full room. You know, the four things, you know, Gretchen, the four things we were talking about, right? The thing is, being in this role on council, I mean, we have to work organically, not forced, okay, to embrace the other three traits because we're going to need to utilize all of them during our time on council. They're all going to come into play. You know, I kind of have one of the other traits as well. One of them, but that's something that we have to impulse and work on organically is to, you know, not be fearful of the other three, and that's my take on it. I got that pretty quick. That's the goal, I think, in my head. So.
And it's awesome that you have all four of the tendencies represented on your governing body. So kind of leaning on the strengths of each other in those moments when you're like, hey, we need some rebel energy here, we need some upholder energy here.
And I need to be questioning.
Yeah, right.
Or be more, you know, forceful, hey, we need to do this. So it goes to like the big picture thing I mentioned, you know, with the six hats. You know, I do have a little bit of the big picture meaning, but to embrace that. Maybe not be a prevalent one, but at least be not as fearful of it.
Great, thank you. And we're remorse.
Yeah, couple things. I mean, I love that, you know, better idea of tendencies of each council member and where we're all kind of bringing to the table. It's good to remember that and remember, I mean, we all know this, but remember that people think like I do, right, always, or become a little bit more perspective, and so that's really helpful. And I think it's really exciting to see the strategic plan be really something that we can work off of. And it provides us this kind of way forward and something that brings unity as well in our efforts. Ultimately, we can always kind of lean back on when we will have getting ideas or priorities. You know, and we all came, you know, we all run for office. We all have like priorities that we bring to the table. And it's really good to see the strategic plan actually encompass a lot of those things that, at least I know, that I spoke about with constituents. So yeah, I'm excited about it. And I did mention this to I think a couple of staff members. I was really excited to see the strategic plan being implemented in a way that is foreseeing cross collaboration between unit or between departments. And it's also creating like a really neat leadership opportunities for people that maybe aren't in structurally leadership roles or director roles. So I think that's a very organizational decision and opportunity. So big fan, excited about.
I'm glad you said that. It reminds me of something Megan and I talked about earlier. We talked a lot yesterday about values. We did not talk specifically about the values that you said earlier last year as part of the strategic planning process. And those were trust, collaboration, excellence, and dedication. So we haven't really talked about those a lot in the retreat, but it's interesting to me how much those themes have cycled through the conversations and through the strategies. So even though we weren't really intentional about it in the retreat, it's clear that you all are really living those values in the way that you are setting and building upon the strategic plan. So when you said collaboration, it kind of reminded me of that. Great, Councilmember Russell.
The momentum before we go over the 2 days yesterday was a lot of understanding of characters and who we are and how we govern. But I thought that played really well or tied into today because it weighed on me so much that was a constant thought when we talked with all the staff members at various times throughout the day. And it brings there's already an appreciation there because I know that everybody works very hard and they're very busy. But this project of the strategic plan is an Everest, and it is so much work for everybody here. And I see it as it's the height of it is still going up while we're in development, because we talked about the additional committees and how that weighs on staff and with their time. I think it forces an empathetic type of approach when working with the staff, understanding. I mean, it's like if it takes a year, maybe it takes a year and a half, but doing it right and doing it with care. Not so much in planning, but with those that are doing the planning. That to me, like when we first started talking about this, we talk about a lot of plans that the city's always doing. And I don't think the realization was there of how big the task was until now, a year later, we're seeing the amount of work that's gone into it. That's still growing because we also just said, you know, how does everything with the boards, how does that tie in? That's a whole other layer that we haven't touched, but in 30 minutes, we just added a ton more work. Of which spot team is going to be absorbing that and bringing it in. It's just, it seems like this, like I said, like an Everest that's continuing to grow high. So my appreciation for staff and all the work that they're doing in it and just gaining that understanding of what it takes to go into this process and come out successful. That's something I'm going to take forward. Because I don't think most residents understand what city employees do. They may have some negative stereotypes and things, but it's something that I'll take with my messaging moving forward when I talk with residents. So you're so unappreciative. You have no idea what these people all their time.
It's about to burst into tears.
I said, we appreciate it. Maybe we could frame it a little different. We already discussed, but I framed it. As discussed in the other room. Yeah, great. Yeah. Same thing.
So, that's what I take forward is the gratitude really and how the days built into each other.
Empathy, gratitude, it's beautiful. Thank you.
I guess my biggest takeaway is the kind of supporting each other. You know, like when we get our cars and stuff like that, you know, we're actually all supporting each other, and I appreciate that.
Sure. Best thing I like to think about after all of our conversation is really having a better understanding of the scope of the strategic plan, introduction of the spots and the spats, and and those teams are really, their role is to implement things, get work done. But also I did like to push and remind everybody in each of the stations that our role as council members are policymakers, and we can't make good policy without being informed. So one of the goals of all the processes should be policy recommendations that are aligned with what the bigger goal is. And so that's always been the intent that I've seen, that I've felt with these strategic plans, is how to give the council better recommendations on which directions to go based off of a bigger plan. And so while a lot of the work can be done without the council, maybe most of the work can be done without the council, with the individual distributed teams, which I really liked hearing about the implementation and leadership being distributed across all different layers of the organization. And then often they will be able to accomplish goals and make the meet the objectives or move closer towards the objectives without council. But when they do find the challenges and the barriers that are keeping them from reaching those goals, that work then transforms into policy recommendations. So council can adjust the set of rules that everybody operates by to accommodate their needs. And that's where I think council can be most useful in our work. It's what our role is suited for.
Yeah, Councilmember Byrd.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is really apparent is the amount of passion and concern that the staff that's about the planning and the actions that we're going into. That's very apparent in having conversations and kind of seeing how everybody was digging into things, which is great. To Councilor Russell's point, some other ones that were some of the comments there. No, I think seeing the passion and stuff that the staff puts into it and the hard work you guys do is great, and it really helps know that the policies and stuff that we're enforcing or trying to bring down are being utilized in a way that's really going to better our community and our city, and that's ultimately what residents want to be in. They just don't know the process of how it's like. They don't realize that this started a year ago, and we're still another year out before we really get everything rolling. They think they can say, hey, I complained to city council meeting last week, why is it just done? We don't realize how long it takes for these companies to roll out and the hard work you guys put into it. So.
Nancy, I'm gonna put you on the spot. We're gonna let you give an administrative reflection, and then we're gonna give the mayor the last word.
Okay. Yeah, so, I'm gonna be a rule breaker.
Oh.
It's my, it's a little bit of an anxious thing. I want to first start with a couple of thank yous. Joanna, if you stand up. So, thanks to Joanna, and frankly to Rob, for doing lots of wrangling, agenda, details, meals, plans, so thank you. Thank you for the lip balm, I literally would have been miserable all weekend. And thanks everybody for prioritizing this time, being away from your families, in that way. So
you know, here's an interesting, I am still the new girl in town. So I think sometimes we forget that I am very much still learning. And so, you know, in terms of reflection, do appreciate that, you know, we have a heavy level of engagement, and partially there's organizational maturity that has contributed to this plan that has come from longstanding council members, longstanding staff, and then also does reflect new energy and new excitement. And so, you know, ultimately it's really fun for me to see those dynamics play out in terms of seeing, you know, those two things come together in a really sort of special way to move us forward. Kind of the big takeaway that I would take away is thank you to the council for lots of patience over the last year for foundational work, whether that was the org review, for the strategic plan, document itself, or the implementation framework and capacity. I know that it's hard as an elected official to cheerlead process. And so thank you for that. And the takeaway that I have is I've heard in many conversations, how do we as staff now use this as a launch point to urgency for action? And so I think lots of the questions today, you know, in small groups and big groups is, okay, we've spent this time, we've made the investment in foundation, and now it's time to deliver on those results. And so I guess, you know, you have my commitment to have urgency to action. I think you probably have commitment of all of the leaders from a shared leadership perspective in this room to also make that commitment going forward too. So I think yesterday in the 4 tendencies or the staff, you know, some of the staff, we love talking about process and recognize that now we need to start talking about results. So that's some of my takeaways.
Mayor, wrap us up.
Sure. So first of all, thank you for everyone for coming. It's hard to take a couple of days out of your schedule. We all have lives outside of what we do as the council and staff. You have families that you want to be with on the weekend. So thank you for taking time here today. I think I kicked this off yesterday saying this was my 13th one of these, and it's probably one of the most interactive, engaged, and beneficial ones that I've been part of, and that's because of the participation in the process. So I think that the value of this event has been huge. Thank you for that as well. And one of the big takeaways I got from the last 2 days was everything is connected. So all of the different strategic plans that we have, they're all touching each other. They're all dependent on each other, whether it's a council member or staff member or an idea or a value, it's all interwoven together. And that came through loud and clear with all the conversations. Really good today.
Well, we echo that sentiment. Thank you for the opportunity to spend this time with you. And that's a wrap.